Welcome to today's episode, where we journey back to humanity's most profound discovery, one that required no tools, no technology, only the courage to look up into the darkness and wonder. Imagine yourself 40,000 years ago, standing on the African savanna as the sun disappears below the horizon. The temperature drops, predators emerge. Your survival depends on firelight and vigilance. But then, as your eyes adjust to the darkness, something miraculous appears overhead. Thousands upon thousands of luminous points, scattered across an infinite black canvas, slowly wheeling through the night. Those ancient humans didn't just see random lights. They saw patterns, stories, maps, a celestial clock that never stopped ticking. They noticed that certain stars rose just before dawn during planting season. They observed that the moon's phases matched the tides and the cycles of game animals. They realized that the bright path across the sky, what we call the Milky Way, pointed toward distant lands and guided them home. This single act of observation, this decision to study the heavens, transformed our species from nomadic survivors into builders of civilizations. The stars became our first teachers, our first gods, our first navigation system, and our first calendar. They told us when to plant and when to harvest, when to travel and when to celebrate. They inspired our first mathematics, our first architecture, our first written languages. Every ancient wonder we'll explore, from Stonehenge to the Great Pyramid, from Polynesian navigation to Mayan astronomy, begins with this simple act: looking up and asking why. How did our ancestors, without telescopes or computers, unlock the secrets of the cosmos? How did they predict eclipses, track planets, and navigate vast oceans using only naked eye observations? And why did every civilization, separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years, independently decide that understanding the stars was worth dedicating their greatest minds and resources? Tonight, we answer these questions. We'll witness the birth of astronomy in Mesopotamian temples, sail with Polynesian wayfinders across the trackless Pacific, stand inside megalithic monuments aligned to celestial events, and decode the mathematical genius of Maya astronomers. This is the story of humanity's first science, the one that made all others possible. Chapter 1. When humans first read the sky, the Blanchard bone doesn't look like much at first glance. Found in a French cave in the early 20th century, it's a fragment of eagle bone about 3 inches long, covered in tiny carved marks that wind around its surface in a serpentine pattern. For decades, archaeologists assumed these marks were decorative. But in the 1960s, researcher Alexander Marshak examined the bone under a microscope and realized something extraordinary. The marks weren't random. They formed a sequence that matched the phases of the moon over a period of 2¼ months. This piece of bone, carved approximately 30,000 years ago, is humanity's oldest known lunar calendar. You're looking at the moment when humans stopped simply observing the sky and started recording it, analyzing it, predicting it. The person who carved this bone lived during the last ice age, wearing animal skins, hunting mammoth, sheltering in caves. Yet they possessed something remarkable: the cognitive ability to track patterns over time, to understand that celestial events repeat in predictable cycles, and to create a system for recording these observations. This wasn't survival knowledge in the immediate sense. You don't need to track moon phases to know when you're hungry or cold. This was something more profound: the birth of science, of systematic observation and record-keeping. The Blanchard bone isn't alone. Across Europe, archaeologists have found similar artifacts from the Upper Paleolithic period, roughly 40,000 to 10,000 years ago. Cave paintings in Lascaux, France, created around 17,000 years ago, show configurations of dots that appear to represent star clusters like the Pleiades. In Spain's El Castillo cave, patterns of dots and hand stencils might encode lunar cycles. These aren't mere decorations, they're data. Our Ice Age ancestors were astronomers, recording observations with whatever materials they had available. But why? What drove these ancient peoples to track celestial movements? The answer lies in survival, but not in the simple, immediate way we might think. Early humans lived intimately connected to natural cycles. They noticed that certain stars appeared on the horizon just before dawn during specific seasons. The heliacal rising of particular stars, their first appearance in the morning sky after a period of being hidden by the sun's glare, coincided with crucial events. Game animals migrated. Plants flowered and produced seeds. Rivers flooded. The weather changed. In a world without written calendars, clocks, or smartphones, the sky was the only reliable timepiece. The moon's phases provided the most obvious cycle, roughly 29.5 days from new moon to new moon. Even today, our word months derives from moon. But the lunar cycle presented a problem. 12 lunar months equal only 354 days, 11 days short of the solar year marked by the seasons. Ancient peoples had to track both cycles, understanding that the moon measured shorter periods, while the sun's annual journey through the stars determined the seasons crucial for plant and animal cycles. The earliest humans to grapple with this problem left traces in unexpected places. At Warrenfield in Scotland, archaeologists discovered a series of pits dug around 8000 BCE, arranged in an arc that aligns with the midwinter sunrise. The pits were repeatedly recut over millennia, suggesting they served as a calendrical monument, helping Mesolithic hunter-gatherers track the solar year. This is 5,000 years before Stonehenge, 6,000 years before the Egyptian pyramids. The people who created this monument lived in small, mobile groups, yet they invested significant labor in constructing a permanent astronomical marker. As humans transitioned from hunting and gathering to agriculture around 10,000 BCE, astronomical knowledge became even more critical. Farming depends on precise timing. Plant too early, and frost kills your seeds. Plant too late, and crops don't mature before winter. Ancient farmers needed to know exactly when spring arrived, regardless of weather variations that might make the season seem early or late. They needed celestial signposts that didn't lie. Different stars served this purpose in different regions. In the Mediterranean, the Pleiades cluster became crucial. These 7 sister stars, visible to the naked eye as a tight grouping in the constellation Taurus, rise just before dawn in spring and set in autumn. The Greek poet Hesiod, writing around 700 BCE, but recording much older agricultural wisdom, advised farmers to begin their harvest when the Pleiades rise and to plow when they set. This knowledge was new even in Hesiod's time. Farmers had been using the Pleiades as a calendar for thousands of years. In other regions, different stars took prominence. Arcturus, the bright orange star in boats, marked planting time across much of northern Europe and Asia. Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky, announced the Nile's annual flood in Egypt. Antares and Scorpius signaled seasonal changes in the tropics. Each culture identified the stars most relevant to their agricultural cycle, weaving them into myth and ritual to ensure the knowledge passed from generation to generation. But early astronomers tracked more than just stars. The sun's position at sunrise and sunset shifts throughout the year, moving north along the horizon from winter solstice to summer solstice, then south again to winter. This movement provided another calendar, one that didn't depend on identifying specific stars. Building structures aligned to solstice sunrises or sunsets created permanent markers of the solar year. Even cultures without writing could preserve this knowledge in stone and earth. The moon presented its own fascinations and challenges. Beyond its phases, early observers noticed that the moon's path across the sky changes over time. Sometimes it rises high overhead. Other times it skims low along the horizon. This variation follows an 18.6-year cycle called the lunar standstill. caused by the tilt and wobble of the moon's orbit. To recognize this pattern requires multi-generational observation, grandparents recording data, parents continuing the work, grandchildren completing the cycle. The fact that Stone Age monuments align to lunar standstills proves that ancient peoples maintained astronomical traditions across generations, passing knowledge from elders to youth through oral tradition and ritual practice. The planets added another layer of complexity. To the casual observer, most celestial objects maintain fixed positions relative to each other. The constellations remain constant. But 5 wandering stars move against this fixed background. The ancient Greeks called them planetes, meaning wanderers. We know them as Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. These planets don't follow simple paths. They generally move from west to east through the zodiac constellations. But periodically, they stop, reverse direction in a loop called retrograde motion, then resume their eastward journey. Understanding planetary movements required years of careful observation and record-keeping. Venus proved particularly important to early civilizations. As the brightest object in the sky after the sun and moon, Venus can cast shadows on dark nights. It appears as either the morning star or evening star, never straying far from the sun. Ancient observers eventually realized these were the same object, though many cultures initially treated them as separate celestial bodies. Venus's cycle, disappearing and reappearing in predictable patterns, held profound symbolic meaning. The planet vanishes into the sun's glare for several days, then dramatically reappears. This death and rebirth cycle resonated with agricultural societies that watched plants die in winter and revive in spring. The earliest astronomical records we can read come from the cusp of prehistory and history, the moment when humans invented writing. Not coincidentally, they invented writing partly to record astronomical observations. In ancient Mesopotamia around 3200 BCE, Sumerian scribes developed cuneiform script, pressing wedge-shaped marks into clay tablets. Among the earliest texts are administrative records, grain stores, livestock counts, tax collections. But also among them are celestial observations. The Sumerians needed to track time for religious festivals, agricultural planning, and commercial contracts. The sky provided their calendar, and writing let them preserve observations with unprecedented accuracy. Before writing, astronomical knowledge existed only in human memory, transmitted through stories, songs, and rituals. A particularly brilliant elder might hold decades of observations in their mind, but this knowledge could be lost if they died before passing it on. Writing changed everything. Now observations could accumulate across centuries, allowing astronomers to identify patterns spanning lifetimes. A scribe could compare the current position of Jupiter with its position 50 years earlier, recognizing cycles that no single human could observe through memory alone. This accumulation of written observations would transform astronomy from weather prediction and calendar keeping into something more profound: the search for underlying mathematical patterns in celestial movements. But this development required more than just writing. It required the social structure to support professional astronomers who could dedicate their lives to sky watching. It required institutions that could preserve records across generations. It required civilizations. The first cities emerge in Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, around 4000 BCE. With cities comes specialized labor. Not everyone needs to farm. Some people can devote themselves to crafts, trade, administration, or religion. And in these first cities, some of the most prestigious and powerful individuals are those who understand the heavens, the priest astronomers, who read the will of the gods in planetary movements and predict the celestial events that mark sacred time. These are the people who will transform occasional sky watching into systematic astronomy, creating the foundation for all future astronomical science. They built their temples as observatories, their priesthoods as astronomical research institutions, and their gods as personifications of celestial powers. In the next chapter, we'll climb the ziggurats of ancient Mesopotamia and witness the birth of mathematical astronomy, the moment when humans first used numbers to predict the future written in the stars. Chapter 2. The Shepherds Who Became Astronomers. The ziggurat of Ur rises from the Mesopotamian plain like a mountain made by human hands. Its terraced levels climb toward the sky, each platform smaller than the one below, creating a massive step pyramid that dominates the landscape for miles. At its summit, 170 feet above the surrounding city, stands a small temple chamber painted brilliant blue to match the heavens. This is 2100 BCE, and from this elevated sanctuary, Sumerian priest astronomers scan the horizon, recording the positions of planets and stars on clay tablets that will survive 4,000 years to reach our hands. You need to understand something crucial about Mesopotamian civilization. Astronomy wasn't a hobby or intellectual curiosity. It was the foundation of religious authority and political power. The kings of Ur, Babylon, and Assyria ruled because the gods ordained it, and the gods spoke through celestial signs. A lunar eclipse occurring during a military campaign might be interpreted as divine displeasure, causing armies to retreat. The heliacal rising of a particular star might signal the proper time for a coronation. Planetary configurations determined whether to sign treaties or declare war. The priest astronomers who could read these signs, and more importantly predict them, wielded tremendous influence. They stood between heaven and earth, interpreting divine will for mortal rulers. This religious framework, surprisingly, didn't inhibit scientific observation, it accelerated it. When your God-given duty is to understand celestial movements, you watch the sky with fanatical attention to detail. When your status depends on successfully predicting astronomical events, you develop rigorous observational methods. When making an error in your calculations might cost you your position or your life, you check and recheck your mathematics. Mesopotamian astronomy was driven by religious imperative, but it produced genuinely scientific results. The Mesopotamians inherited a sophisticated astronomical tradition from their Sumerian predecessors. By 3000 BCE, the Sumerians had identified and named the major constellations, dividing the night sky into recognizable patterns. Many of these constellations remain with us today, their names translated through Greek and Latin into our modern star charts. The constellation we call Taurus the Bull was Gu, and the Bull of Heaven, to the Sumerians. Our Leo the Lion was Yorgiu, the Lion. Scorpius maintained its scorpion identity across cultures and millennia. These weren't random patterns humans saw in the stars. They were deliberately constructed reference systems, a coordinate grid projected onto the heavens. The Sumerians divided the sky along the sun's annual path, the ecliptic, into 12 sections, creating the zodiac. The word zodiac comes from the Greek meaning circle of animals, but the concept originated in Mesopotamia by at least 1000 BCE, possibly much earlier. The zodiac served multiple purposes. It provided a framework for recording planetary positions. Mars was in Aries is more useful than Mars was in the eastern sky, because Aries occupies a specific region along the ecliptic. The zodiac also created a calendar, as the sun passes through each constellation over the course of the year. When the sun was in Taurus, spring had arrived. When it entered Leo, summer was underway. But the 12-sign zodiac presented a mathematical problem. The solar year contains approximately 365.25 days, while 12 lunar months contain only 354 days. This 11-day discrepancy meant that a purely lunar calendar drifts relative to the seasons, a problem that vexed every early civilization. The Mesopotamians solved it through intercalation, adding an extra month periodically to keep the lunar calendar aligned with the solar year. By the Old Babylonian period, around 1800 BCE, they had developed a systematic intercalation cycle, inserting a 13th month 7 times in every 19 years. This 19-year cycle, later called the Metonic cycle after a Greek astronomer who discovered it centuries later, achieves remarkable accuracy. 19 solar years equal almost exactly 235 lunar months. The difference is only a few hours. Discovering this cycle required meticulous record-keeping across generations. Mesopotamian astronomers maintained detailed observational diaries, recording not just spectacular events like eclipses, but routine observations, which planets were visible, where in the zodiac they appeared, when the moon rose and set, the day's weather conditions. These diaries weren't merely descriptive. They included precise measurements. Babylonian astronomers measured celestial positions in degrees, dividing the circle into 360 units, a system we still use today. They measured time in hours, dividing the day and night into 12 units each. Our entire system of angular and temporal measurement derives from Babylonian mathematics. The Babylonians worked in a sexagesimal, base 60 number system, which is why we have 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, and 360 degrees in a circle. Base 60 might seem awkward compared to our decimal system, but it has advantages. The number 60 has many factors 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, 20, 30, and 60 making it easy to divide into halves, thirds, quarters, fifths, and sixths without fractions. For astronomical calculations involving periodic cycles, this divisibility proved invaluable. The Mesopotamians' mathematical sophistication extended far beyond simple counting. Clay tablets from the Old Babylonian period show they could solve quadratic equations, work with Pythagorean triples, and perform complex calculations with sexagesimal fractions. They understood mathematical concepts that European scholars wouldn't rediscover until the Renaissance. This mathematical prowess was essential for astronomy because celestial mechanics is fundamentally mathematical. Planets don't move at random. They follow precise mathematical patterns. Discovering these patterns requires not just observation but numerical analysis. By the late Babylonian period, after 700 BCE, Mesopotamian astronomers had accumulated centuries of observational data. They began extracting mathematical patterns from this data, developing what we now call mathematical astronomy. They discovered that lunar eclipses follow an 18-year, 11-day cycle called the Saros, after which the pattern of eclipses repeats. If you know a lunar eclipse occurred on a certain date, you can predict another will occur 1 Saros later. The ancient Greeks credited this discovery to Thales of Miletus around 585 BCE, but cuneiform tablets prove the Babylonians knew it centuries earlier. Thales probably learned it from Babylonian sources. The Babylonians went further, developing mathematical models that could predict planetary positions years in advance. They noticed that Jupiter's position against the zodiac repeats every 12 years almost. After 12 years, Jupiter has completed just over 1 full circuit through the zodiac, appearing slightly ahead of where it started. But after 83 years, Jupiter returns almost exactly to its starting position. The Babylonians called this an 83-year period. They developed similar period relations for all the visible planets. Saturn, 59 years. Mars, 47 years. Venus, 8 years. Mercury presented greater challenges due to its proximity to the Sun, but they eventually worked out its 46-year cycle. These weren't just interesting patterns. They were predictive models. If you knew where Jupiter was in year 1, you could calculate where it would be in year 83. More importantly, you could work backward, calculating where it had been before written records began. This allowed Mesopotamian astronomers to reconstruct the celestial history of their civilization. identifying the astronomical configurations present during the founding of cities, the reigns of great kings, the victories in crucial battles. They could project forward, predicting future configurations for planning religious festivals, determining auspicious dates for royal activities, and impressively, accurately warning future eclipses. The Babylonians never developed a physical model of the cosmos, explaining why planets moved in these patterns. They didn't ask whether Earth or the Sun sat at the center of the solar system. They didn't speculate about the nature of celestial objects or the mechanisms driving their movements. Their astronomy was purely mathematical. They found numerical patterns in the observational data and used those patterns to make predictions. This approach worked remarkably well. Babylonian planetary predictions were accurate enough that Greek astronomers imported Babylonian data and methods wholesale, and those methods remained in use for over 1,000 years. Consider the famous Mall, pin tablets compiled around 1000 BCE, of preserving much older material. These tablets contain a comprehensive astronomical compendium, a catalog of stars and constellations, the dates when particular stars rise and set, the paths of the planets through the zodiac, instructions for predicting lunar visibility, schemes for intercalating the calendar, and omens associated with celestial phenomena. The Mall, pin tablets represent centuries of accumulated astronomical wisdom, codified in a form that scribes could copy and students could study. This was textbook astronomy, systematizing knowledge that had previously existed only in oral tradition and scattered observations. But we need to address the elephant in the room: astrology. To modernize, Mesopotamian astronomy is inextricably mixed with what we dismiss as superstition. Planets weren't just celestial objects, they were gods. Jupiter was Marduk, chief deity of Babylon. Venus was Ishtar, goddess of love and war. Mars was Nergal, god of plague and the underworld. When these planets appeared in certain configurations, the gods were communicating, and their messages needed interpretation. The same priest astronomers who calculated planetary periods also compiled omen texts. If Mars approaches Regulus, the king will die. If Jupiter and Venus conjoin in Cancer, there will be abundant harvest. Here's what you need to understand. In ancient Mesopotamia, there was no distinction between astronomy and astrology. The same person, using the same observational data and mathematical methods, both predicted where planets would appear and interpreted what those appearances meant. The goal wasn't to understand nature in our modern sense, but to understand divine will. The gods created patterns in the heavens. Humans who decoded those patterns gained access to divine knowledge. Yet this religious framework produced genuinely scientific results. The requirement to predict astronomical events accurately drove rigorous observational methods, precise record-keeping, and sophisticated mathematics. When a priest astronomer predicted an eclipse and it occurred exactly as calculated, this demonstrated both divine favor and mathematical skill. When a prediction failed, either the mathematics needed correction or the interpretation required adjustment. This created a feedback loop that, while framed in religious terms, operated according to scientific principles. Make predictions. Test them against observations. Refine your models based on results. The Babylonians passed this astronomical knowledge to other cultures through trade, conquest, and cultural exchange. When the Persian Empire conquered Mesopotamia in the 6th century BCE, Persian Magi absorbed Babylonian astronomical techniques. When Alexander the Great conquered the Persian Empire in the 4th century BCE, Greek scholars gained access to centuries of Babylonian observational records. The Greeks would transform this mathematical astronomy into something new, a physical model of the cosmos based on geometry and mechanics. But the foundation, the observational data and mathematical methods, came from Mesopotamia. The legacy of Mesopotamian astronomy surrounds us. Our 24-hour day, our 60-minute hour, our 360-degree circle. our zodiac, our 7-day week, based on the 7 visible moving celestial objects: sun, moon, and 5 planets, all derived from Babylonian astronomy. When you check your horoscope, you're engaging with a tradition that began on those ziggurat temples 4,000 years ago. When you measure angles in degrees, you're using Babylonian mathematics. But perhaps the most important legacy is less tangible: the idea that nature follows mathematical patterns that humans can discover and use to predict the future. This concept, which seems obvious to us now, wasn't obvious at all. It required centuries of painstaking observation and calculation to establish. It required a culture that valued accuracy, preserved records, and trained each generation in the methods of the previous one. The shepherd peoples who settled in Mesopotamia created the world's first scientific tradition. They looked at the chaotic complexity of planetary movements and found mathematical order. They took one of humanity's most fundamental questions: what does the future hold? And discovered it could be answered through patient observation and rigorous calculation. This was the revolutionary insight that made science possible. Chapter 3: Egypt's Divine Alignment. The star Sirius appears on the horizon just before dawn, brilliant and white, rising out of the desert darkness like a cosmic messenger. For 70 days, this brightest of all stars has been invisible, hidden by the sun's glare. Now, in mid-July, it returns, and within days, the Nile begins to rise. This isn't coincidence. It happens every single year. The heliacal rising of Sirius, which the Egyptians called Suptet, announces the annual flood that will transform the arid valley into fertile farmland, sustaining one of history's greatest civilizations. The Egyptian calendar begins on this day. The agricultural year begins on this day. The religious year begins on this day. A single star coordinates the entire society. You're standing on the west bank of the Nile at Giza in 2560 BCE, watching an event that will baffle historians for millennia. The Great Pyramid, tomb of Pharaoh Khufu, nears completion. This monument rises 481 feet into the desert sky, built from 2.3 million stone blocks, each weighing 2 to 15 tons. The engineering required to construct this edifice is staggering, but equally impressive is its astronomical precision. The pyramid's sides align to the cardinal directions: north, south, east, west, with an accuracy of better than 1/15 of a degree. The precision is so extraordinary that modern surveyors marvel at it. How did Egyptian engineers, working without compasses or telescopes, achieve such accuracy? The answer lies in the stars. The Egyptians didn't have magnetic compasses, but they had something better: circumpolar stars that never set below the horizon. If you stand in Egypt and watch the northern sky over the course of a night, you see stars rotating around a point we call the celestial North Pole. In our era, the star Polaris sits conveniently near this pole, providing an easy marker for true north. But Earth's axis precesses like a wobbling top, completing one cycle every 26,000 years. In 2560 BCE, no bright star marked the pole. Instead, Egyptian astronomers used a technique called the Indian circle, or circular method. They observed 2 circumpolar stars at the moment when one's directly above the other, both crossing the north meridian simultaneously. This line pointed exactly north. By using multiple star pairs and averaging the results, they could determine true north with remarkable precision. But the Great Pyramid's astronomical alignments go deeper than cardinal orientation. The pyramid's descending passage, which leads from the original entrance down into the bedrock beneath the structure, points toward the north celestial pole with extraordinary accuracy. Standing at the bottom of this passage and looking up, an observer in Khufu's time would see a specific star transiting the narrow shaft Thuban, the star that served as the pole star during the Old Kingdom. Was this intentional? The mathematical precision suggests yes. The pyramid wasn't just a tomb. It was a machine for stellar observation, a stone instrument designed to track the cosmos. The pyramid's shafts present even more mysteries. Two narrow channels, roughly 8 inches square, run from the king's chamber through the pyramid as massive bulk to exit on the northern and southern faces. For years, Egyptologists assumed these were ventilation shafts, but their angle and orientation suggest another purpose. In 1964, astronomer Virginia Trimble and Egyptologist Alexander Bedoy proposed that these shafts targeted specific stars. The southern shaft, at an angle of approximately 45 degrees, pointed toward the belt of Orion, specifically toward the lowest of the 3 belt stars at the moment they crossed the southern meridian. The northern shaft targeted Thuban, the pole star of that era. Why Orion? Because to the Egyptians, Orion wasn't just a constellation. It was Sa, the celestial form of Osiris, god of the afterlife and resurrection. Sirius, rising shortly after Orion, was his consort Isis. The 3 pyramids at Giza, some researchers argue, mirror the 3 stars of Orion's belt, deliberately creating an earthly representation of the cosmic realm where the pharaoh would spend eternity. This is controversial. Many Egyptologists dispute the correlation between the pyramids and Orion's belt. But what's undeniable is that Egyptian religion was profoundly astronomical. The gods lived in the sky. The pharaoh, upon death, transformed into a star and ascended to join them. The pyramids served as launching pads for this celestial journey. Egyptian astronomy was intimately connected to their calendar system, which was among the most sophisticated in the ancient world. They developed a civil calendar of 365 days, divided into 12 months of 30 days each, with 5 additional days added at the year's end. This calendar originated from observing the Nile's flood cycle, which followed the solar year. However, the Egyptians knew their 365-day calendar was slightly inaccurate. The solar year is actually 365.25 days. Over time, the civil calendar slowly drifted relative to the actual seasons, gaining 1 day every 4 years, completing a full cycle of error every 1,460 years. This period, called the Sothic cycle, was tracked by comparing the civil calendar to the heliacal rising of Sirius, which maintained its connection to the solar year and the Nile flood. The Egyptians employed professional astronomers, often priests attached to temples, whose responsibilities included timekeeping and calendar maintenance. They developed star clocks for measuring time at night, since sundials don't work after sunset. These star clocks, called diagonal calendars, appear painted on coffin lids and temple ceilings. They list 36 groups of stars, called decans, which rise above the eastern horizon at 10-day intervals throughout the year. By observing which decan was rising, an astronomer could determine both the date and the time of night. Different decans were visible at different hours, providing a celestial clock that, while less precise than modern timepieces, served Egyptian society's needs for over 2 millennia. The Egyptians also tracked planetary movements, though not with the same mathematical rigor as the Babylonians. They identified the 5 visible planets and recognized them as different from fixed stars. Mars was Horus of the horizon, or Horus the Red. Jupiter was Horus who limits the 2 lands. Saturn was Horus, bull of the sky. Venus, appearing as both morning and evening star, had multiple names. Mercury, difficult to observe due to its proximity to the sun, was Sebgu, associated with Seth. These planetary gods appeared in religious texts and temple decorations, though Egyptian astronomy remained primarily focused on the sun, moon, and circumpolar stars rather than planetary motion. The temple at Karnak, built over many centuries but with major construction under the New Kingdom pharaohs, demonstrates Egyptian architectural astronomy at its peak. The temple's main axis aligns to the winter solstice sunset. On this shortest day of the year, sunlight penetrates the entire length of the temple. illuminating the inner sanctuary. Other temples show similar astronomical alignments. The Temple of Ramesses II at Abu Simbel, carved into a cliff face in Nubia, aligned so that twice yearly on February 21st and October 21st sunlight penetrates 200 feet into the mountain to illuminate statues of the pharaoh and gods in the innermost chamber. The dates are significant. They mark Ramesses II's birthday and coronation day, or possibly the equinoxes when the structure was built. Later movements of the temple to avoid flooding from the Aswan Dam slightly changed the dates. Egyptian astronomical knowledge served practical purposes beyond calendar keeping and religious ritual. Navigation depended on celestial observation. Egyptian sailors traveling the Nile at night used stars for navigation. More ambitiously, Egyptian expeditions to Punt, possibly modern Somalia or Yemen, requiring long sea voyages down the Red Sea, relied on stellar navigation. The circumpolar stars provided bearings for north-south orientation, while rising and setting stars indicated east and west. The Egyptians developed nautical astronomy long before the Greeks, though their methods were less systematized and less mathematical. The Egyptian approach to astronomy differed fundamentally from the Mesopotamian. While Babylonians focused on mathematical patterns and prediction, Egyptians emphasized practical timekeeping and religious significance. Babylonian astronomy was abstract and computational. Egyptian astronomy was visual and observational. Babylonians developed complex mathematical models for planetary motion. Egyptians were content to note that planets moved without attempting to predict their positions precisely. These different approaches reflected different cultural values. Mesopotamian civilization was urban, commercial, and administratively complex, requiring precise calendrical calculations. Egyptian civilization was agricultural and theocratic, requiring reliable seasonal markers and religious festivals aligned to celestial events. Yet, Egyptian astronomy achieved something the Babylonians never attempted: the integration of astronomical knowledge into massive stone monuments that would endure for millennia. The pyramids, temples, and obelisks of Egypt were more than impressive engineering. They were statements in stone about the relationship between earth and sky, between human and divine, between temporal power and eternal cosmos. When you stand before the Great Pyramid today, you're not just seeing a pharaoh's tomb, but a civilization's astronomical knowledge made permanent. A monument that has tracked the precession of Earth's axis across 4,500 years. The Egyptian astronomical tradition influenced neighboring cultures. The Greeks absorbed Egyptian astronomical lore during the Hellenistic period after Alexander's conquest. The astronomer Eudoxus of Cnidos studied in Egypt, learning Egyptian star lore and calendar systems. Ptolemy, the great Greco-Egyptian astronomer of the 2nd century CE, worked in Alexandria and had access to both Egyptian and Babylonian astronomical records. The Egyptian Decan system influenced later Greek and Arabic astronomy. Elements of Egyptian astronomical mythology: the transformation of the deceased into stars, the celestial location of the afterlife appear in Greek mystery religions and eventually in early Christian cosmology. But perhaps Egypt's greatest astronomical legacy is less technical than symbolic. The pyramids, standing at the desert's edge, aligned to cosmic order, represent humanity's aspiration to connect Earth and heaven. They embody the belief that we're not isolated on a random planet, but participants in cosmic order, that our lives connect to something larger and more permanent than individual existence. This belief, that understanding the cosmos helps us understand our place in it, has driven astronomy throughout history. The Egyptian contribution was making this belief tangible, constructing monuments that physically connected terrestrial and celestial realms, buildings that were simultaneously tombs, temples, and observatories, architecture that was also astronomy. As the sun sets over the Nile Valley and Sirius rises in the east, you can still feel the power of that connection. The same star that announced the flood to ancient farmers still shines, brilliant and unwavering. The same pyramids still align to north with astonishing precision. The stones endure, the stars endure, and the knowledge encoded in their relationship endures, a gift from a civilization that saw divinity in the heavens and built monuments to bridge the gap between Earth and infinity. Chapter 4: Monuments that touch the cosmos. Dawn breaks over Salisbury Plain on the winter solstice, and you're standing in the center of a stone circle that has weathered 5,000 years of wind, rain, and mystery. Stonehenge looms around you, massive sarsen stones arranged in a precise circle, topped with lintels that have somehow remained in place for millennia. The outer circle measures approximately 100 feet in diameter, and within it stand even larger stones arranged in a horseshoe pattern. You face northeast, looking through a narrow gap in the stones toward a rough-hewn pillar standing alone on the plain. The sky begins to brighten. Then, exactly on the horizon, exactly aligned with that solitary stone, the sun appears. This is no accident. The people who built Stonehenge, working without metal tools, without written plans, without the mathematical formulas we take for granted, nonetheless understood enough about astronomy to create a structure that captures the solar alignment with stunning precision. The heel stone, that solitary pillar, marks the point where the sun rises on the summer solstice. On that longest day of the year, sunlight streams through the entrance and illuminates the center of the monument. Thousands of years later, it still works perfectly. But why? The answer lies in something we often forget about our prehistoric ancestors. They were no less intelligent than we are. They simply lacked the accumulated knowledge and technology we've inherited. But they possessed the same capacity for observation, the same ability to recognize patterns, the same drive to understand their world. And they had something modern people often lack: patience. They watched the sky night after night, generation after generation, noting the slow movements of celestial objects with meticulous attention. Over decades and centuries, they discovered patterns that could only be seen through such sustained observation. Stonehenge wasn't built all at once. Archaeological evidence reveals at least 3 major construction phases spanning over 1,500 years, from approximately 3000 BCE to 1500 BCE. The earliest phase consisted of a circular ditch and bank, with wooden posts marking various positions. Even this primitive structure showed astronomical alignments. The main axis oriented toward the summer solstice sunrise and winter solstice sunset. These events occur on the same line, viewed from opposite directions. This alignment appears deliberate, suggesting that from its very beginning, Stonehenge served as an astronomical monument. The second phase, around 2500 BCE, saw the addition of the bluestone smaller stones, each weighing several tons, transported from the Preseli Hills in Wales, 150 miles away. Why anyone would move 80 stones such enormous distances, crossing rivers and hills, remains debated. But their placement wasn't random. The bluestones formed a double circle, aligned to the same solstice axis. Then, around 2400 BCE, came the monument's most impressive transformation. The massive sarsen stones, each weighing up to 50 tons, were brought from the Marlborough Downs, 20 miles north, shaped with remarkable precision, and erected in their current configuration. The engineering required was extraordinary. The builders dug pits to hold the stones, used levers and ropes to raise them upright, then lifted the horizontal lintels, some weighing 10 tons, into position 30 feet above the ground. The lintels connect using mortise and tenon joints, woodworking techniques translated into stone. The outer face of the circle curves slightly on each stone so that, when assembled, they form a perfect circle. This suggests sophisticated geometric knowledge and careful planning. But Stonehenge's astronomical sophistication goes beyond the solstice alignment. In 1963, Astronomer Gerald Hawkins proposed that Stonehenge functioned as a sophisticated astronomical computer. Using a mainframe computer cutting-edge technology for his time, Hawkins analyzed the alignments of various stones and features. He found that numerous sightlines through the stones pointed to significant astronomical events, not just the solstices, but also the equinoxes, and more remarkably, the extreme positions of the moon during its 18.6-year cycle. The moon's movements are more complex than the sun's. While the sun's rising and setting, positions oscillate between the same northern and southern limits each year. The moon's range varies over an 18.6-year cycle. At the cycle's peak, called the major lunar standstill, the moon rises and sets at its most extreme positions on the horizon farther north and south than the sun ever reaches. At the cycle's minimum, called the minor standstill, the moon's range is constrained. Hawkins identified alignments at Stonehenge that marked these lunar standstills. If correct, this suggests the builders understood a celestial cycle that takes nearly 2 decades to complete. No individual observer could discover this pattern in a single lifetime. It requires generational knowledge transfer. Grandparents would have observed and recorded the moon's positions. Parents would have continued the observations, and grandchildren would have completed the cycle and recognized the pattern. This implies an unbroken tradition of astronomical observation spanning at least 2 generations, probably more. It suggests a society with stable knowledge transmission systems, where astronomical lore was carefully preserved and passed down. Not all archaeologists accept Hawkins's interpretations. Critics argue that with enough stones and enough celestial events, you can always find some alignments by chance. The debate continues, but even the most conservative archaeologists acknowledge that Stonehenge was deliberately aligned to the solstices at minimum, demonstrating sophisticated astronomical knowledge. Stonehenge isn't unique. Across Britain and Ireland, megalithic monuments display astronomical alignments. Newgrange, a passage tomb in Ireland's Boyne Valley, was built around 3200 BCE, older than Stonehenge, older than the Egyptian pyramids. The tomb's entrance faces southeast, and above the doorway is a precisely constructed opening called the roof box. For several days around the winter solstice, at dawn, sunlight penetrates through this opening, travels down the 60-foot passage, and illuminates the central chamber. For 17 minutes, the heart of the tomb blazes with light. Then darkness returns for another year. The precision is astounding. The passage was constructed with a slight upward slope so that the sunrise beam, entering at a low angle, can reach the chamber. The roof box was positioned at exactly the right height to capture the solstice sun. The builders understood the sun's movements well enough to predict where it would be at a specific time on a specific day, then constructed a monument to capture that moment. This wasn't a lucky guess, it was applied astronomy. At Meshow in the Orkney Islands, another passage tomb shows similar sophistication. Built around 2800 BCE, the tomb's entrance aligns so that on the winter solstice, the setting sun shines down the passage to illuminate the rear wall. Like Newgrange, this required precise knowledge of the sun's position at a specific time of year. The builders achieved this without compasses, without theodolites, without any of the surveying instruments we consider essential. They used the sun itself as their reference point, marking its position at sunrise or sunset, tracking its movements over the year, identifying the solstice as the point where the sun's movement along the horizon reverses. Beyond individual monuments, some researchers have identified landscape-scale astronomical markers. The Scottish archaeologist Alexander Thom spent decades surveying megalithic sites across Britain. He proposed that many stone circles, standing stones, and cairns were positioned to create sight lines for observing specific celestial events. From one location, a standing stone on the horizon might mark a solstice sunset. From another location, the same stone might indicate a lunar standstill. Tom argued that prehistoric peoples created networks of markers across entire landscapes, turning valleys and hilltops into vast astronomical instruments. Tom's work remains controversial. Many archaeologists question whether prehistoric peoples really created such sophisticated systems, but the basic principle is sound. If you want to track celestial events accurately, you need horizon markers. A distant mountain or hill provides a fixed reference point. By noting where the sun or moon rises or sets relative to this marker, you can track celestial movements with considerable precision. Prehistoric observers probably used natural features, prominent hills, distinctive rock formations as markers. In areas lacking such features, they may have erected artificial markers, standing stones that served as permanent reference points. The stone circles of Britain come in many forms. Some, like Stonehenge, are large and complex. Others are simple rings of upright stones. Castlereagh in Cumbria, built around 3200 BCE, consists of 38 stones forming an oval approximately 100 feet across. Avery in Wiltshire, constructed around 2600 BCE, is enormous, a circular ditch and bank nearly a mile in circumference, containing several inner stone circles. These monuments took thousands of person-hours to construct. The communities that built them were mobilizing significant labor forces for astronomical purposes. Why? What motivated Neolithic peoples to invest such effort in celestial observation? The practical answer involves agriculture. Farming requires precise seasonal timing. You need to know when to plant, when to expect frost, when to harvest. The sun's annual cycle provides a reliable calendar. By marking the solstices, the extreme points of the sun's annual movement, you create permanent reference points that don't depend on weather or temperature, which can vary significantly from year to year. A late spring might make the season feel delayed, but the sun reaches the summer solstice on the same date regardless. Celestial markers provide certainty in an uncertain world. But there's more than practicality at work. These monuments required extraordinary effort, moving massive stones long distances, shaping them with only stone hammers, positioning them with precision. This investment suggests the work held profound significance. The monuments were likely religious centers, places where communities gathered for rituals timed to celestial events. The solstices marked not just agricultural transitions, but also spiritual ones. The death and rebirth of the sun, the turning points of the cosmic cycle. In many traditional societies, celestial events connect the human and divine realms. The sky is where gods dwell. The sun, moon, and stars are divine beings, or the visible manifestations of divine power. When celestial events occur, solstice, an eclipse, a planetary alignment, the boundary between worlds becomes permeable. Rituals performed at these moments carry special potency. The monuments that mark these events are therefore sacred spaces, places where Earth touches heaven. Recent archaeological work has revealed that Stonehenge was part of a larger ceremonial landscape. Nearby, archaeologists have discovered Durrington Walls, a massive timber circle and settlement area. During the late Neolithic period, people gathered here by the thousands during the winter solstice. They feasted on pork and beef, animals raised elsewhere, and brought to the site specifically for these gatherings. After the festivities at Durrington Walls, which aligned to the winter solstice sunrise, participants likely walked along a processional avenue to Stonehenge, which aligned to the winter solstice sunset, completing a ritual journey from sunrise to sunset, from life to death, from the Kai-Sant, timber world of the living, to the stone world of ancestors. This pattern monuments marking significant celestial events, serving as gathering places for communities, combining astronomical observation with religious ritual, appears across prehistoric Europe. The megalithic tombs of Malta, built between 3600 and 2500 BCE, show astronomical alignments. The temple of Najra aligns so that at the equinoxes, sunlight illuminates the inner sanctum, while at the solstices, sunlight illuminates side chambers. In Brittany, France, the alignments of Karnak stretch for miles, thousands of standing stones arranged in rows. Their purpose still debated, but certainly involving astronomical observations. Even more mysterious are the Neolithic sites of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, dated to around 9600 BCA, before agriculture, before pottery, before metalworking. This site, consisting of massive carved pillars arranged in circles, is the world's oldest known monumental architecture. Some researchers argue that the pillars' carvings depict constellations, that the site served as an astronomical observatory. Whether this interpretation is correct remains debated, but it pushes back the origins of monumental astronomy to the very dawn of civilization. What's clear is that from the moment humans settled into communities, they looked up. They tracked the sun's movements, the moon's phases, the stars' positions. They encoded this knowledge in monuments built to last, structures that captured celestial alignments and transformed them into tangible, permanent references. These monuments served multiple purposes: calendars, ceremonial centers, observatories, tombs. They were multi-purpose structures reflecting the interconnected nature of prehistoric life, where astronomy, agriculture, religion, and community identity blended seamlessly. The people who built these monuments left no written records explaining their purposes or methods. We can only infer their knowledge from what they built and from the astronomical alignments those structures preserve. But those alignments speak clearly. They tell us that Neolithic peoples understood the solar year well enough to identify solstices and equinoxes. They understood the lunar cycle well enough to track the 18.6-year standstill period. They possessed surveying skills, allowing them to create precise alignments across great distances. They had organizational capabilities, allowing them to mobilize labor forces for multi-generational construction projects. And they had cultural systems that preserved astronomical knowledge across generations, ensuring that the observations made by ancestors informed the constructions built by descendants. These weren't primitive people stumbling through a mysterious world. They were sophisticated societies with complex knowledge systems, capable of achievements that still impress us today. When you stand at Stonehenge on the summer solstice and watch the sun rise over the heelstone, you're witnessing knowledge that has survived 5,000 years. The stones have weathered. The cultures that built them have vanished. The languages they spoke are lost. But their astronomy remains encoded in stone, aligned to celestial events that continue regardless of human affairs. This is the power of astronomy. It connects us to something larger than ourselves, something that transcends individual lifetimes and civilizations. The stars that guided Neolithic peoples still shine. The sun still marks the solstices. And monuments built millennia ago still capture those moments, testifying to humanity's eternal fascination with the heavens. Chapter 5. The Dragon Empire's Celestial Bureaucracy. The night sky over ancient China in 1300 BCE blazes with activity. A brilliant light appears where no star should be, a guest star that rivals Venus in brightness, visible even in daylight for several weeks before gradually fading from view. In the imperial capital, astronomers scrambled to observe this portent, recording its position, brightness, duration, and eventual disappearance with meticulous precision. These observations will be carved onto oracle bones, preserved for millennia. Modern astronomers, reading these ancient records, will recognize the description of a supernova, a stellar explosion that occurred thousands of light years away, but was witnessed and documented by Chinese astronomers 3,300 years ago. You need to understand something fundamental about Chinese civilization. Astronomy was never merely scientific curiosity. It was the foundation of imperial legitimacy. The emperor ruled by the mandate of heaven, and heaven communicated through celestial events. Unusual phenomena, comets, eclipses, planetary conjunctions, new stars, signaled heaven's approval or displeasure. An emperor who ignored these signs risked losing the mandate. An emperor who correctly interpreted and responded to them demonstrated his fitness to rule. This made imperial astronomers among the most important officials in the entire governmental apparatus. The office of imperial astronomer dates back to at least the Shah dynasty, traditionally around 2070 BCE, though historical records from this early period are semi-legendary. By the Shang dynasty, 1610-46 BCE, we have concrete evidence of professional astronomers maintaining careful records. Oracle bones, turtle shells, and ox scapulae used for divination contain astronomical observations alongside questions about harvests, military campaigns, and royal health. These observations were directly relevant to state decisions. Should the king launch a military expedition? Consult the oracle bones, which include recent astronomical phenomena that might indicate heaven's will. The Zhou dynasty, which overthrew the Shang around 1046 BCE, formalized the concept of the mandate of heaven. The Zhou argued that the Shang had lost heaven's favor, which justified the conquest. Celestial omens had warned of the Shang's decline: eclipses, comets, unusual weather. The Zhou claimed they recognized these signs and acted as heaven's instruments. This established a pattern that would persist throughout Chinese history. Astronomical phenomena as political commentary. An eclipse during a new emperor's reign might be interpreted as heaven questioning the succession. A bright comet could herald a change of dynasty. This political importance drove Chinese astronomers to develop the most comprehensive and continuous astronomical records in the ancient world. From the Shang dynasty onward, Chinese astronomers maintained detailed logs of celestial observations. They recorded solar and lunar eclipses, planetary positions, comets, meteors, novae, sunspots, and auroras. Some records span years, others span centuries. The Spring and Autumn Annals, covering 722 to 481 BCE, contains precise dates for 37 solar eclipses, allowing modern astronomers to verify the accuracy of these ancient observations. Their remarkably precise Chinese astronomers consistently dated eclipses to the correct day, sometimes noting the exact time. Chinese astronomy developed sophisticated calendrical systems. The traditional Chinese calendar is lunisolar, like the Babylonian and Hebrew calendars, attempting to synchronize lunar months with the solar year. But the Chinese approach was more complex. They developed various systems over the centuries, each trying to reconcile the incommensurable lunar and solar cycles with greater precision. The Siphon calendar, developed around 104 BCE, calculated the solar year as 365.25 days, exactly correct for a first approximation. It used a 19-year cycle with 7 intercalary months, similar to the Babylonian system but independently developed. Later calendars became increasingly sophisticated. The Daming calendar of 463 CE calculated the solar year as 365.2428 days, extraordinarily close to the modern value of 365.2422 days. This precision required centuries of observations to detect the tiny discrepancies between calendar calculations and actual solar movements. Chinese astronomers measured these discrepancies by tracking the sun's position against background stars, noting when equinoxes and solstices occurred relative to calendar dates, and adjusting their calculations accordingly. The Chinese divided the sky into 283 asterism star patterns similar to Western constellations, but more numerous and generally smaller. These asterisms were grouped into 4 symbolic regions representing mythological creatures: the azure dragon of the east, the vermilion bird of the south, the white tiger of the west, and the black tortoise of the north. Each region contained multiple asterisms associated with various aspects of the state officials: palaces, markets, armies. The sky mirrored the earthly empire. When something unusual occurred in a particular asterism, it signified events affecting the corresponding earthly institution. The celestial North Pole held special significance. The star closest to the pole, which changed over centuries due to precession, was called the Emperor's Star. The circumpolar constellations that never set were the Purple Forbiddens, enclosure representing the Emperor's palace and family. Surrounding this were the Supreme Palace enclosure and Heavenly Market enclosure, representing government officials and commercial activities. This cosmic bureaucracy paralleled the earthly one, with celestial officials overseeing their domains just as earthly officials did. Chinese astronomers made numerous significant discoveries. They were among the first to recognize that comets were celestial objects, not atmospheric phenomena. They classified comets by appearance: sword comets, broom comets, bushy comets, and tracked their movements across the sky. The famous Halley's Comet has been recorded at every apparition since at least 240 BCE in Chinese records, providing a continuous observational record spanning over 2 millennia. Chinese astronomers also observed and recorded sunspots, dark patches on the sun's surface visible to the naked eye under certain atmospheric conditions or through smoked glass. Western astronomers wouldn't discover sunspots until the 17th century CE, but Chinese records document them from at least 28 BCE. These observations noted the sunspot size, position on the solar disk, and duration, providing modern solar physicists with valuable historical data about long-term solar activity cycles. Supernova received particular attention. Chinese records document the appearance of guest stars, transient celestial objects that appear suddenly, brighten dramatically, then fade. Modern astronomers have identified several of these as supernova by correlating Chinese positional descriptions with known supernova remnants. The famous Crab Nebula, for instance, corresponds to a guest star observed in 1054 CE, recorded as being visible in daylight for 23 days. Chinese records provide the only reliable historical documentation of many supernova, making them invaluable for modern astrophysics. The Chinese also tracked planets systematically. They identified the 5 visible planets and associated them with the 5 elements: wood, Jupiter; fire, Mars; earth, Saturn; metal, Venus; and water, Mercury. They recorded planetary positions, conjunctions, and retrograde motion. Chinese astronomers recognized that planets followed complex paths through the zodiac, though they developed different mathematical models than Babylonian astronomers for predicting planetary positions. Chinese astronomical instruments were sophisticated. The armillary sphere, consisting of nested rings representing celestial coordinates, allowed precise measurement of star positions. Chinese astronomers were using armillary spheres by at least the 4th century BCE, possibly earlier. The sphere could be rotated to show the sky at different times and dates, serving as both an observational instrument and a computational device. Later versions included mechanical drives that rotated the sphere automatically, creating a kind of astronomical clock. The seismoscope, invented by Zhang Heng in 132 CE, represents Chinese scientific ingenuity applied to a natural phenomenon. Though not strictly astronomical, it demonstrates the observational and instrumental sophistication of Chinese science. The device could detect earthquakes occurring hundreds of miles away, indicating the direction of the seismic event. Zhang Heng was also an astronomer who created detailed star catalogs and improved armillary sphere designs. Chinese astronomy faced unique challenges due to its political importance. Astronomers who failed to predict eclipses could be executed. According to legend, 2 court astronomers named Shi and Ho were beheaded around 2136 BCE for failing to predict an eclipse, becoming drunk instead of performing their duties. Whether this specific story is historical or legendary, it reflects the very real stakes involved in imperial astronomy. Success brought prestige and security. Failure brought disgrace or death. This pressure created both positive and negative effects. On one hand, it motivated astronomers toward maximum accuracy and diligence. On the other hand, it sometimes led to false reports or modified observations that aligned with political expectations. If an emperor wanted to claim heaven's favor, astronomers might be pressured to interpret celestial events favorably. If political factions wanted to undermine an emperor, they might emphasize inauspicious omens. Despite these political pressures, Chinese astronomical records are remarkably reliable. Modern astronomers can verify ancient eclipse predictions, planetary positions, and comet sightings against computer models of historical celestial mechanics. The records generally check out, demonstrating that Chinese astronomers maintained scientific integrity despite political pressures. They understood that falsifying observations risked even greater disaster if the deception was discovered, or if subsequent events contradicted fabricated reports. Chinese astronomy influenced neighboring cultures. Korean, Japanese, and Vietnamese astronomers all adopted elements of Chinese astronomical systems, including calendar methods, constellation patterns, and observational techniques. Chinese astronomical texts were studied throughout East Asia, creating a unified astronomical tradition across the region. When Jesuit missionaries arrived in China in the 16th century CE, they found an astronomical tradition as sophisticated as Europe's, in some ways more advanced, with observational records extending far deeper into the past. The Chinese made one crucial discovery that Western astronomers would not recognize until the 19th century precession of the equinoxes. The astronomer Yushi, around 330 CE, noticed that the positions of stars relative to the sun at the equinoxes had shifted since earlier observations. He calculated that the equinox point moved through the constellations at a slow but measurable rate. This discovery anticipated Hipparchus's observation of precession by several years, though Hipparchus is usually credited in Western histories, because his work influenced European astronomy, while Yushi has remained confined to East Asian astronomical traditions. Chinese astronomical calendars serve practical purposes beyond imperial politics. Farmers used them to determine planting and harvesting times. Merchants relied on them for scheduling long-distance trade expeditions. Festival dates, religious observances, and family celebrations followed the calendar. An accurate calendar was essential for social coordination in a vast empire. The emperor's ability to promulgate an accurate calendar demonstrated his control over time itself, his mastery of cosmic patterns, his fulfillment of the mandate of heaven. The Imperial Observatory in Beijing, established in its final location during the Ming Dynasty, but successor to earlier observatories, symbolized the state's commitment to astronomy. The observatory housed bronze astronomical instruments of exquisite craftsmanship, armillary spheres, celestial globes, quadrants, sextants. These instruments, some still preserved today, represent the pinnacle of pre-telescopic astronomical technology. They allowed measurements accurate to within minutes of arc, precise enough to track planetary movements and stellar positions with remarkable accuracy. Chinese astronomy represents perhaps the clearest example of how astronomy and political power intertwined in ancient civilizations. The astronomer wasn't a detached scientist seeking abstract truth. He was a government official whose observations had immediate political consequences. His work product wasn't just data, but political intelligence about heaven's will. His employer wasn't merely a patron, but the emperor himself, whose rule depended partly on the astronomer's skill and accuracy. Yet from this highly politicized context emerged genuine scientific achievements. Chinese astronomers developed precise calendars, maintained meticulous records, made important discoveries, created sophisticated instruments, and advanced mathematical methods for astronomical calculations. They proved that science could flourish even in a system where observations carried political stakes, that accuracy and reliability could emerge from a context where errors had serious consequences, that the pursuit of celestial knowledge could thrive under imperial patronage. As night falls over the Forbidden City and stars emerge above the golden rooftops, you can imagine imperial astronomers ascending to the observatory platform, consulting star charts, adjusting bronze instruments, recording observations in beautiful calligraphy. They're serving the emperor, yes, but they're also serving something larger, the accumulated astronomical knowledge of their civilization, the tradition passed down through centuries, the effort to understand heaven's patterns and preserve that understanding for future generations. The stars they observe are the same stars we see today. The patterns they recorded endure in their texts, and their dedication to celestial observation, despite its political complications, helped create one of history's most comprehensive astronomical traditions. Chapter 6. Navigators of the Endless Ocean. The outrigger canoe rides the Pacific swells like a living thing, responding to every movement of wind and water. You're somewhere in the vast triangle between Hawaii, New Zealand, and Easter Island, the largest expanse of ocean on Earth, covering more than 20 million square miles. No land is visible in any direction. No compass guides your direction. No sextant measures your position. No charts map your course. Yet the navigator standing in the stern knows exactly where you are, where you're going, and how to get there. He reads the stars like a book, the waves like a language, the birds like signposts. This is perhaps the greatest navigational feat in human history. The settlement of the Pacific Islands by Polynesian wayfinders using only traditional knowledge and celestial navigation. To understand how extraordinary this achievement was, you need to grasp the scale and difficulty involved. The Pacific Ocean covers nearly 1/3 of Earth's surface. The islands scattered across this immensity are tiny specks of land separated by hundreds or thousands of miles of open water. Many islands are low-lying atolls barely visible from more than a few miles away. Missing your target by even a small navigational error means sailing past it entirely, potentially becoming lost forever in an endless expanse of ocean. Yet Polynesian navigators regularly made voyages of over 1,000 miles, arriving at islands they couldn't see until they were almost upon them. The settlement of the Pacific represents one of humanity's greatest migrations. Starting from Southeast Asia around 3,000 years ago, Austronesian-speaking people sailed eastward, island hopping across Melanesia and Micronesia. Around 1000 BCE, they reached Samoa and Tonga, establishing the cultures we recognize as Polynesian. Then came the Great Expansion to the Marquesas around 300 CE, to Hawaii by 400 CE, to Easter Island by 800 CE, to New Zealand by 1200 CE. These dates remain debated, but the pattern is clear. Over roughly 2,000 years, Polynesian navigators explored and settled virtually every habitable island in the vast Pacific. How did they do it? The answer lies in a sophisticated navigational system passed down through oral tradition, memorized through years of training, tested on voyage after voyage. This system combined astronomy, oceanography, meteorology, and ecology into an integrated method for finding one's way across trackless ocean. At the heart of this system was stellar navigation, using the stars to determine direction and, to some extent, latitude. Polynesian navigators divided the sky into a star compass with roughly 32 segments, each marked by the rising or setting position of a particular star or constellation. As stars rise in the east and set in the west, they trace arcs across the sky, but each star rises and sets at specific points on the horizon. These points don't change from night to night. Arcturus always rises at the same point, sets at the same point. By memorizing which stars rise and set at which positions, a navigator creates a mental compass with 32 directional points, instead of our familiar 4 cardinal directions and their subdivisions. When sailing from one island to another, the navigator memorizes the star path, the sequence of stars that will guide the journey. If sailing from Tahiti to Hawaii, roughly northward, the navigator knows that certain stars rising ahead mark the correct direction. As Earth rotates and early evening stars set, later stars rise to take their place. The navigator follows each star in sequence, maintaining course through the night. Different seasons require different star paths because different stars are visible at different times of year. A complete navigator memorizes star paths for multiple routes in multiple seasons, hundreds of individual pieces of information held entirely in memory. But stars alone aren't sufficient. During daylight, stars aren't visible. Cloud cover can obscure them at night. Navigators needed multiple methods for determining direction and position. The sun provides directional information rising east, setting west, reaching its highest point in the south in the northern hemisphere. The angle of the sun at noon indicates latitude, though Polynesian navigators didn't think in terms of latitude. Instead, they recognized that islands at similar latitudes had the same noon sun angle. If sailing north or south, the changing sun angle indicated progress toward the destination latitude. When the sun reached the angle associated with the destination island, the navigator knew he'd reached the correct latitude and could turn to sail along it. Ocean swells provided another crucial navigational tool. Swells long, regular waves generated by distant weather systems travel across the ocean in consistent directions. In the Pacific, dominant swells come from the northeast and southeast trades. Skilled navigators learn to feel these swells through the boat's movement, distinguishing the underlying swell direction from local wind waves. By maintaining a constant angle relative to the dominant swell, a navigator could hold course even without visible celestial references. Islands modify swell patterns. When swells encounter an island, they reflect back, creating interference patterns detectable dozens of miles away. Experienced navigators could feel these patterns and use them to locate islands even when the island itself remained below the horizon. The Marshall Islanders of Micronesia created stick charts, frameworks of coconut fronds with shells representing islands that mapped these wave interference patterns. These charts weren't used during voyages, but rather as teaching tools, helping students visualize how swells behaved around islands. Cloud formations offered another sign. Clouds that form over islands differ from clouds over open ocean. The coral sands of atolls reflect sunlight differently than ocean water, creating a pale greenish tint on the underside of clouds called a cloud lagoon. Navigators learned to spot these telltale colors from up to 30 miles away, well before the island itself came into view. High volcanic islands create their own weather, with clouds forming around peaks. In the morning, navigators looked for stationary clouds amid moving clouds. The stationary ones marked land. Birds provided navigation clues. Some seabirds, frigatebirds, boobies, noddies returned to land each evening. Seeing these birds in late afternoon indicates land in the direction they're flying. Different species have different ranges. Terns might feed 20 miles from land, boobies 40 miles, frigatebirds 60 miles. A navigator who understood bird behavior could estimate distance to land based on which species were observed. The deep knowledge required for Polynesian navigation was preserved through rigorous training systems. In Hawaii, navigators trained at special schools where students spent years learning from master navigators. The training wasn't just intellectual but experiential. Students sailed thousands of miles under a master's supervision, learning to read waves and stars not from books but from direct observation. Memory techniques included elaborate systems of chants and stories that encoded navigational information in narrative form, making it easier to remember and transmit. The oral tradition meant this knowledge was vulnerable. When Polynesian societies encountered European colonization in the 18th and 19th centuries, traditional navigation began to decline. Western navigation tools, compasses, sextants, charts seemed more reliable and required less training. Missionary influence disrupted traditional education systems. By the mid-20th century, traditional Polynesian navigation had nearly vanished. In many island groups, no one remained who knew the old methods. But in 1973, a remarkable revival began. A master navigator named Ma Pialag from the Carolinas agreed to train a group of Hawaiians in traditional navigation. In 1976, a replica traditional voyaging canoe named Hokula sailed from Hawaii to Tahiti, roughly 2,400 miles, using only traditional navigation methods, no instruments. Ma Pialag navigated, and the successful voyage proved that the ancient methods worked. This sparked a renaissance of traditional navigation across the Pacific. New canoes were built, young people trained, long-distance voyages undertaken. Traditional navigation, facing extinction, experienced a dramatic revival. The Hako of voyages revealed details about traditional navigation that had been forgotten or poorly documented. Ma Pialag demonstrated how he maintained course by observing star positions not just at the horizon but throughout the sky. Even when clouds obscured horizon stars, zenith stars, those passing directly overhead provided directional information. He showed how to use the flight patterns of birds, the color of water, the types of floating debris, and dozens of other subtle signs to navigate. Perhaps most remarkably, Ma revealed the concept of a moving island. In traditional navigation, the navigator doesn't conceive of the canoe as moving through a fixed ocean. Instead, the canoe remains stationary while islands move past it. This mental model simplifies the complex calculations of currents and drift. The navigator imagines a reference island, perhaps the departure point, moving backward at a speed determined by the canoe's speed and the current. Other islands move as well, and when the destination island arrives at the canoe's position, you've reached your destination. This elegant conceptual framework makes intuitive sense in a way that plotting courses on a chart does not. The settlement pattern across the Pacific reveals Polynesian navigation's effectiveness. The prevailing winds and currents in the tropical Pacific blow from east to west. This means sailing eastward against the trades was more difficult than sailing westward with them. The fact that Polynesians settled islands like Hawaii and Easter Island, far to the east and north of their starting points, demonstrates they could sail to windward, a difficult feat in traditional canoes. They must have deliberately explored in all directions, not just drifting downwind. This raises the question, why? What motivated people to undertake dangerous voyages across vast ocean expanses to uncertain destinations? Some voyages were surely accidental. Canoes blown off course by storms might have discovered new islands unintentionally. But the systematic settlement pattern suggests deliberate exploration. Perhaps population pressure on established islands drove people to seek new lands. Perhaps political conflicts forced losing factions to flee. Perhaps simple curiosity and the desire for prestige motivated explorers. Whatever the reason, Polynesian navigators repeatedly chose to sail into the unknown, trusting their skills and knowledge to find land or return home. Not all voyages succeeded. For every successful settlement, how many canoes were lost at sea? We'll never know. The archaeological record shows us only the successes, the islands that were settled. The failures left no trace. Traditional Polynesian stories contain accounts of voyages to distant lands that could never be found again, suggesting some islands were discovered but then lost, their positions forgotten or impossible to reach again under changed conditions. The double-hulled voyaging canoes used for these journeys were technological marvels. Carved from massive trees, up to 60 feet long, lashed together with coconut fiber rope, capable of carrying dozens of people plus supplies for weeks at sea. The hulls were designed for speed and stability, with outriggers or double-hull configurations preventing capsizing. Sails woven from pandanus leaves caught the wind. These weren't primitive vessels, but sophisticated ocean-going craft, the result of centuries of refinement and optimization. Each voyage required extensive preparation. Navigators planned routes, consulted weather patterns, chose departure times to coincide with favorable winds and currents. Provisions had to be loaded dried fish, fermented breadfruit paste, coconuts for water, taro. The canoes carried not just supplies for the journey, but the seeds and animals needed to establish new settlements: pigs, chickens, dogs, taro corms, breadfruit shoots, coconut seedlings. These colonization voyages weren't exploratory scouting missions, but full migrations, entire communities committing to finding and settling new lands. The navigators held positions of immense prestige and authority. In Hawaiian society, navigators came from the alai, the noble class. Their knowledge was considered sacred, passed down through family lines. A skilled navigator could command high payment for his services, and navigators often became important political figures. The same knowledge that enabled ocean voyaging also provided deep understanding of astronomy, weather, and natural patterns, expertise valuable in many contexts beyond navigation. The astronomical knowledge required for Polynesian navigation was extensive. Navigators needed to recognize hundreds of stars, know their rising and setting positions, understand how these positions varied with latitude, predict which stars would be visible in different seasons. They tracked the sun's path through the year, noting solstices and equinoxes. They understood lunar cycles, using the moon's position to determine direction and time of night. They recognized planets and their movements, though planets were less useful for navigation than fixed stars because their positions changed. Some Polynesian astronomical knowledge parallels that of other cultures. The Pleiades held importance across the Pacific, marking seasonal transitions. In Maori culture, the pre-dawn rising of Matariki, the Pleiades, in June signaled the new year. In Hawaii, the Hawaiical rising of the Pleiades marked the beginning of Makahiki, a harvest festival lasting 4 months. The constellation Maui's fishhook or Scorpius was prominent in Polynesian mythology. Orion's belt was recognized across the Pacific. These shared astronomical references suggest a common cultural origin, with knowledge spreading as peoples migrated across the ocean. But Polynesian navigators also developed unique astronomical traditions suited to their needs. They didn't divide the sky into zodiac signs like Mediterranean cultures. They didn't track planetary positions with Babylonian precision. Their astronomy was practical, focused on what was needed for navigation and seasonal timekeeping. Star names and constellation patterns varied between island groups, each developing their own traditions while maintaining core navigational principles. The zenith stars that passed directly overhead at a particular latitude proved especially useful. These stars trace a path across the zenith as the night progresses, but they all pass through the exact same point at their highest altitude. An island's latitude can be identified by which stars pass through its zenith. Navigators memorized which stars passed overhead at important islands. When sailing toward an island, once the navigator saw that island's zenith star passing overhead, he knew he'd reached the correct latitude and could adjust course to east or west to find the island itself. This method required understanding the relationship between terrestrial latitude and celestial declination, the concept that stars at a particular declination, angular distance from the celestial equator, pass through the zenith at a corresponding terrestrial latitude. Polynesian navigators didn't use these technical terms, but they understood the principle intuitively. They knew, for instance, that Arcturus passes directly over Hawaii near 20N latitude, and that sailing until Arcturus passed overhead meant reaching Hawaii's latitude. The precision required is extraordinary when you consider the navigational challenge. An error of just a few degrees in latitude might mean missing an island entirely. If Hawaii is at 20N and you're sailing from Tahiti at 17S, you need to cover 37 degrees of latitude, roughly 280 nautical miles, and arrive within perhaps 1 degree of your targetitude to be close enough to use other signs, clouds, birds, wave patterns to locate the island. This means navigational accuracy of better than 3%, maintained over weeks at sea, using only celestial observation and dead reckoning. Modern navigators using sextants and chronometers aim for similar accuracy, but they have precision instruments. Polynesian navigators achieved it using only their trained senses and accumulated knowledge. The question of whether Polynesians reached South America has long intrigued researchers. Easter Island lies only about 2,000 miles from the Chilean coast, a long voyage, but well within Polynesian capabilities. The sweet potato, a South American crop, was present in Polynesia before European contact, suggesting some connection. Recent genetic studies have found Native American DNA in some Polynesian populations, with the mixture dating to around 1200 CE. The most likely explanation is that Polynesian voyagers did reach South America, made contact with indigenous peoples, acquired sweet potatoes, and returned home, an extraordinary achievement demonstrating the range and confidence of Polynesian navigation. Compare this to European exploration. Columbus' 1492 voyage across the Atlantic covered roughly 3,400 miles and was considered an unprecedented feat of navigation. He had compasses, charts, astronomy texts, a sizable fleet. Yet Polynesian navigators routinely made voyages of similar or greater length centuries earlier, in smaller craft, without instruments, guided only by their knowledge and skill. The European age of exploration was actually the second age of exploration. Polynesians had already explored the largest ocean on Earth 1,000 years before Europeans ventured beyond coastal waters. The revival of traditional navigation in recent decades has revealed how much knowledge was nearly lost. In the 1960s, anthropologists interviewing elderly Pacific Islanders found that traditional navigation was remembered only fragmentally. A few old men recalled some star names, some wave-reading techniques, fragments of the elaborate system their ancestors had used. Malpialag was one of the last people alive who had been fully trained in the traditional way, learning directly from masters who had learned from their masters in an unbroken chain stretching back centuries. His willingness to teach Hawaiians, breaking with the tradition that navigation knowledge should be guarded within families and islands saved the tradition from extinction. Today, traditional navigation schools operate across the Pacific. Young people learn the old methods, not as museum pieces, but as living practices. Modern voyaging canoes cross the Pacific regularly, their navigators using celestial navigation, wave reading, and bird watching just as their ancestors did. These voyages aren't mere historical reenactments. They're assertions of cultural identity, demonstrations that indigenous knowledge has value, proof that the traditional ways still work. The story of Polynesian navigation teaches several lessons. First, it reminds us that sophisticated astronomical knowledge developed independently in cultures that never had contact with Mediterranean or Asian civilizations. Polynesians didn't learn astronomy from Greeks or Chinese. They developed their own traditions suited to their needs and environment. Second, it demonstrates that elaborate knowledge systems can exist without writing. Polynesian navigational knowledge, entirely oral, was as sophisticated as any written astronomical tradition. Third, it shows how fragile such knowledge is. Without institutions to preserve it, without trained practitioners to pass it on, entire systems of knowledge can vanish within a single generation. As you stand on the deck of a traditional canoe, somewhere in the vast Pacific, stars wheeling overhead, feeling the swell beneath you, you grasp something profound about humanity's relationship with the cosmos. These navigators didn't build stone monuments or write elaborate texts. They didn't calculate planetary orbits or predict eclipses. But they achieved something equally remarkable. They learned to read the stars so fluently that they could cross the largest ocean on Earth, finding tiny islands separated by thousands of miles of open water, carrying their families and culture to establish new homes in the most remote places humans have ever settled. Their astronomy was pragmatic, memorized, and tested against the ultimate criterion: survival. Every successful voyage validated the knowledge. Every safe arrival proved the stars could be trusted. And every new island settled expanded humanity's range, demonstrating once again that with knowledge, courage, and skill, even the vastest barriers can be crossed. Chapter 7. The Maya's mathematical universe. Deep in the rainforest of the Yucatan Peninsula, a stone pyramid rises above the jungle canopy. This is El Castillo at Chichen Itza, and it's 800 CE. As you climb the steep steps to the summit, you count them 91 steps on each of the 4 sides, plus the platform at the top, totaling 365 one for each day of the solar year. This isn't coincidence. Every dimension of this structure encodes astronomical knowledge. During the spring and fall equinoxes, the angle of the setting sun creates a shadow pattern along the pyramid's northern staircase that resembles a serpent descending from the heavens, the feathered serpent god Kukulkan visiting the earthly realm. The Maya didn't just observe astronomy. They built it into their architecture, their mathematics, their calendar, their entire worldview. The Maya civilization, flourishing in Mesoamerica from roughly 2000 BCE to 1500 CE, developed one of the most sophisticated astronomical traditions in the ancient world. They achieved this without telescopes, without metal tools, without draft animals or wheeled vehicles. They worked in stone using stone tools, yet they calculated the length of the solar year more accurately than the Julian calendar used in Europe until 1582. They tracked the planet Venus with such precision that their calculations differ from modern values by only 2 hours over a 500-year period. They predicted eclipses. They understood the concept of zero and place value notation centuries before these ideas reached Europe. Their intellectual achievements rank among humanity's greatest. Maya astronomy served multiple purposes: practical, religious, and political. Practically, astronomy provided calendars for coordinating agricultural activities and social events. Religiously, celestial events marked the actions of gods and ancestors, with astronomical cycles determining when rituals must be performed. Politically, Maya rulers claimed descent from gods and ancestors associated with celestial objects, using astronomical knowledge to legitimize their authority and demonstrate their connection to divine powers. The Maya developed multiple calendar systems operating simultaneously, each tracking different cycles. The hub was a solar calendar of 365 days, divided into 18 months of 20 days each, plus 5 additional nameless days considered unlucky. The Tzolk'in was a ritual calendar of 260 days, created by combining the numbers 1 through 13 with 20-day names, creating 260 unique combinations. These two calendars intermeshed like gears, with any given combination of Hab and Tzolk'in dates repeating only once every 52 years, a period called the calendar round. But the Maya went further. They developed a long count, an absolute calendar that counted days from a mythological creation date, corresponding to August 11/31/14 BCE in our calendar. The long count used a modified base 20 vigesimal numbering system. This system could track time over vast spans. The current long count cycle, which began in 3114 BCE, completed 13 Bactans, approximately 5,125 years, on December 21, 2012. In our calendar, a date that sparked modern apocalyptic speculation, but which the Maya viewed simply as the completion of one grand cycle and the beginning of another. The existence of such long-term calendrical cycles demonstrates that Maya civilization thought in terms of deep time, tracking historical and mythological events across millennia. The accuracy of Maya solar calendar is remarkable. Modern astronomy calculates the tropical year, the time for the sun to return to the same position relative to the equinoxes, as 365.2422 days. The Hob calendar of 365 days is obviously approximate, accumulating an error of 1 day every 4 years. But Maya astronomers understood this. Inscriptions at Copan suggest they tracked the actual solar year as approximately 365.2420 days, only 17 seconds different from the modern value. This accuracy required observations spanning centuries, carefully comparing calendar dates with astronomical events like solstices, identifying tiny discrepancies, and calculating corrections. Venus received extraordinary attention from Maya astronomers. The Dresden Codex, one of only 4 surviving Maya books, contains detailed Venus tables tracking the planet's synodic period, the time between successive appearances in the same position relative to the Sun. Venus's synodic period is approximately 584 days. The Dresden Codex tables track Venus through 65 synodic periods, totaling 37,960 days, after which Venus returns to almost the same position in the sky and the same position in the calendar. The Maya calculated this cycle as exactly 584 days per synodic period, which is only slightly different from the modern value of 583.92 days. Over 65 cycles, this tiny discrepancy accumulates to about 5 days, and the Dresden Codex includes correction factors to account for this drift. Why such interest in Venus? The planet held profound religious significance. Venus was associated with the god Kukulkan Quetzalcoatl in central Mexico, the feathered serpent. The planet's movements, appearing as morning star, disappearing into the sun's glare, re-emerging as evening star, disappearing again, were interpreted as the god's death and resurrection. Moreover, Venus's cycles correlated with warfare. Maya rulers scheduled battles and sacrificial rituals to coincide with specific phases of Venus, particularly its heliacal rising as the morning star, when it first becomes visible in the dawn sky after its inferior conjunction with the sun. The Dresden Codex also contains eclipse tables. Predicting eclipses is mathematically complex because 3 cycles must align. The lunar month, approximately 29.5 days. The draconitic month, the time for the moon to return to the same node where its orbit crosses the ecliptic, approximately 27.2 days. And the anomalistic month, the time between successive perigees, approximately 27.6 days. Eclipses occur only when all these cycles align properly. The Maya recognized that eclipses follow a 405-month cycle, approximately 11,960 days, after which the pattern repeats. The Dresden Codex eclipse tables cover 11,958 days, tracking potential eclipse dates within this cycle. Maya astronomers observed from specially designed buildings. At Chichen Itza, the structure called El Caracol, the snail, features a spiral staircase leading to an observation chamber with window openings aligned to astronomical events. One window points to the setting position of Venus at its southernmost extreme. Others align with the sun at the equinoxes and the moon at its extreme positions. At Esmo, the governor's palace aligns with Venus at its southernmost setting position. At Uas Akchin, a group of buildings called Structure E7 Sub allows an observer standing at a specific point to see the sun rise over different temple platforms at the solstices and equinoxes, creating a solar observatory in architectural form. Maya mathematics was remarkably sophisticated. They independently developed the concept of zero, representing it with a shell glyph. This might not seem revolutionary, but zero is actually a profound mathematical abstraction. Ancient Babylonians had a placeholder symbol, but not true zero. Ancient Greeks and Romans lacked zero entirely. The Maya, along with Indian mathematicians, were among the first to treat zero as a number with its own properties. The Maya used a base 20 vigesimal number system instead of our base 10 decimal system. In base 20, you count from 0 to 19, then the next number is written as 10, 120, 0 ones, equivalent to 20 in decimal. The number 400 is written as 10, 0, 1 400, 0 20s, 0 ones. For calendrical calculations, they modified this slightly, using 18 by 20, 360 for the third position instead of 20 by 20 equals 400, because 360 approximates the solar year. This modified vigesimal system appears in the long count calendar. Place value notation, where a digit's position determines its value, was essential for Maya mathematical astronomy. Without place value, calculations become cumbersome. Roman numerals, for instance, lack place value, making multiplication and division difficult. Mayan numerals use dots, value 1, and bars, value 5, combined to represent numbers 0 through 19, with position indicating whether you're counting 1s, 20s, 400s, etc. This system enabled complex calculations necessary for astronomical predictions. Maya hieroglyphic writing recorded astronomical observations and predictions. Inscriptions on stelae, upright stone monuments, often include dates in multiple calendar systems, along with statements about astronomical events. For instance, an inscription might record a long count date, the corresponding Hab and Zulkan dates. Note that Venus rose as morning star, and describe a ritual performed by the ruler to mark the occasion. These inscriptions served historical, religious, and political functions simultaneously. Deciphering Maya hieroglyphs was one of the great intellectual achievements of 20th century archaeology. For decades, scholars could read the numerical and calendrical glyphs, but not the accompanying text. A breakthrough came in the 1950s and 60s when researchers realized the script was both logographic, symbols representing whole words, and phonetic, symbols representing sounds. This led to rapid progress in translation. Today, the majority of Maya inscriptions can be read, revealing a wealth of historical and astronomical information. The inscriptions show that Maya rulers were deeply invested in astronomy. Many rulers had astronomical titles or were associated with specific celestial bodies. Rituals marking astronomical events were major state occasions, with the ruler performing ceremonies that demonstrated his ability to communicate with gods and ancestors in the sky. Failed predictions or improperly timed rituals could undermine a ruler's legitimacy, creating pressure for astronomical accuracy. Maya astronomical knowledge accumulated over centuries through institutional continuity. Priestly schools trained successive generations in astronomical observation and calendrical calculation. Knowledge was recorded in bark paper books called codices, though sadly, Spanish conquistadors and missionaries destroyed the vast majority of these books, viewing them as works of the devil. Only 4 Maya codices survive: the Dresden, Madrid, Paris, and Grolier codices, plus fragments of others. These books contain astronomical tables, ritual calendars, almanacs, and mythological narratives, representing a tiny fraction of Maya written knowledge. The precision of Maya astronomy is especially impressive given their lack of certain technologies. They had no lenses or telescopes to magnify distant objects. They had no clocks more precise than water clocks and sundials. They had no metal instruments for measuring angles. Yet they tracked celestial movements with accuracy comparable to Babylonian and Chinese astronomers who had access to bronze instruments and longer historical records. How did they achieve such precision? Partly through long-term observation. Maya civilization existed for over 2,000 years, allowing astronomical observations to accumulate across many generations. Partly through architectural observatories that provided fixed reference points for measuring celestial positions. Partly through sophisticated mathematics that could detect and correct small errors, and partly through cultural commitment, Maya society valued astronomical knowledge highly, supporting professional astronomers and preserving their observations. Maya cosmology integrated astronomy with mythology and religion. The sky was the realm of gods. The Milky Way was the road to the underworld. Constellations represented mythological scenes. The 3 stars of Orion's belt were the cosmic hearthstones at the center of creation. The Pleiades were a rattlesnake's rattle. The Maya saw in the stars not abstract mathematical patterns, but living narratives, cosmic dramas involving gods and heroes. This mythological framework didn't prevent accurate astronomical observation. It motivated it. If Venus represents the feathered serpent god, then tracking Venus precisely becomes an act of religious devotion. If eclipses signal cosmic battles between gods, then predicting them demonstrates your connection to divine knowledge. Maya astronomy was simultaneously scientific and sacred, combining rigorous observation with profound religious meaning. The collapse of classic Maya civilization around 900 CE disrupted, but didn't destroy Maya astronomical traditions. In the post-classic period, cities like Chichen Itza and Mayapan continued astronomical observations. The astronomical codices date from this later period, preserving knowledge from earlier centuries. When Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 16th century, Maya astronomical practices still flourished. Spanish accounts describe Maya priests consulting astronomical tables, timing rituals to celestial events, teaching students the ancient knowledge. Colonial oppression severely damaged these traditions. Spanish authorities, viewing Maya religion as paganism, suppressed astronomical practices tied to religious rituals. They burned books, destroyed temples, and persecuted practitioners of traditional knowledge. Much Maya astronomical lore was lost. Yet fragments survived in remote communities, in secret ceremonies, in memories passed from grandparents to grandchildren. Modern Maya peoples retain some traditional astronomical knowledge, particularly calendrical systems used for agricultural timing and ritual observances. The rediscovery of Maya astronomy began in the 19th century when explorers like John Lloyd Stevens and Frederick Catherwood documented Maya ruins, sparking archaeological interest. By the early 20th century, scholars had deciphered the numerical and calendrical systems. Mid-20th century breakthroughs in hieroglyphic decipherment revealed the historical and astronomical content of inscriptions. Today, archaeoastronomers study Maya sites to understand the astronomical alignments and purposes of buildings. This research has revealed the full extent of Maya astronomical achievement. They track not just the Sun, Moon, and Venus, but also Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, and Saturn, though with less precision than Venus. They recognize the Milky Way's seasonal visibility patterns. They may have observed and recorded supernova, a possibility still debated among researchers. They understood that astronomical cycles of different lengths could be correlated to find longer metacycles when multiple phenomena align. The Maya demonstrate that sophisticated astronomy could develop in a civilization very different from old world societies. They had no contact with Babylonian, Egyptian, or Chinese astronomers. They independently invented mathematical concepts like zero and place value. They developed unique calendar systems that nevertheless achieved remarkable accuracy. Their astronomy served their culture's specific needs: calendrical coordination, agricultural timing, religious ritual, political legitimization. But in serving these needs, they achieved intellectual breakthroughs that rival any ancient civilization. Standing atop El Castillo as the equinox sun sets, casting the serpent shadow down the pyramid side, you witness the integration of astronomy, mathematics, architecture, religion, and politics that characterized Maya civilization. This isn't just a building. It's a statement in stone about cosmic order, about humanity's ability to understand and predict celestial events, about the connection between earthly power and heavenly patterns. The Maya looked up at the same stars we see, tracked the same planets, observed the same moon. But they built a civilization around this knowledge, encoding it in monuments that still stand, calculations that still work, calendars that still function. Their astronomy was uniquely theirs, yet reminds us that the drive to understand the cosmos, to find pattern in celestial chaos, to connect heaven and earth through knowledge. This drive is universal, crossing all boundaries of culture, geography, and time. Chapter 8. Babylon's Star Catalogues. The clay tablet sits in the British Museum, covered in cuneiform script so densely packed that translators need magnification to read it. This is one of the astronomical diaries from ancient Babylon, dated to 568 BCE, and it contains something extraordinary, a record of every single night's observations for an entire year. Planetary positions, lunar phases, weather conditions, market prices for grain, all meticulously recorded by scribes whose names we'll never know, but whose work has survived 2,600 years. These aren't isolated observations made during spectacular celestial events. This is systematic astronomy, night after night, year after year, century after century, building a database that would revolutionize humanity's understanding of the heavens. You're standing in Babylon in the 6th century BCE, capital of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, a city of perhaps 200,000 people, one of the largest in the ancient world. The city stretches along both banks of the Euphrates, connected by a bridge, surrounded by massive defensive walls. Rising above the urban sprawl are the ziggurats, step temple pyramids where priest astronomers conduct their nightly observations. The most famous is Temenanki, the temple of the foundation of heaven and earth, dedicated to Marduk, chief god of Babylon. This structure, possibly the inspiration for the biblical Tower of Babel, stood nearly 300 feet tall, its summit providing an unobstructed view of the horizon in all directions. The Babylonian astronomical tradition we're witnessing represents the culmination of over 1,000 years of Mesopotamian sky watching. But something has changed. Earlier Mesopotamian astronomy focused primarily on omens, interpreting celestial events as messages from gods about earthly affairs. That tradition continues, but now Babylonian astronomers are doing something more. They're systematically recording observations with the goal of finding mathematical patterns that can predict future celestial events. This is a subtle but profound shift from reading divine will to calculating cosmic mechanics. The astronomical diaries exemplify this systematic approach. Each diary covers a period of time, often 6 months or a year, and records observations in a standardized format. For each night, scribes note the date in the Babylonian calendar, the positions of the 5 visible planets, Jupiter, Venus, Saturn, Mars, Mercury, relative to specific reference stars and zodiacal constellations, the time of moonrise and moonset, lunar phases, any unusual phenomena like eclipses, meteors, or comets, and remarkably, weather conditions and economic data like commodity prices. Why include economic data in astronomical records? Because Babylonian astronomers sought correlations between celestial events and earthly affairs. If grain prices consistently rose during certain planetary configurations, this would validate astrological principles and demonstrate that the gods communicated through celestial signs. Modern scientists would call this spurious correlation, but for Babylonian astronomers, the cosmos was an integrated whole where celestial and terrestrial phenomena naturally influenced each other. The astronomical diaries began systematically in the 7th century BCE and continued through the Seleucid period into the 1st century BCE, over 600 years of continuous observations. Hundreds of these tablets survive, though this represents only a fraction of the original corpus. Many tablets were deliberately copied and recopied when they became worn, ensuring the observations remained accessible. This long-term preservation shows that Babylonians understood these records had value far beyond immediate needs. They were building a scientific database for future analysis. And analyze they did. By the late Babylonian period, around 400 to 100 BCE, astronomers had extracted remarkable patterns from the accumulated data. They discovered that lunar eclipses follow the Saros cycle, a period of 18 years and 11 1/3 days, after which the pattern of eclipses repeats. If a lunar eclipse occurred on a certain date, another would occur 1 Saros later, at approximately the same time of day, but about 120 degrees of longitude westward, the 1/3 day shift. This meant that if you observed an eclipse in Babylon, the next one in the cycle might not be visible from Babylon, but from somewhere far to the west. The Saros cycle had profound implications. It meant eclipses weren't random divine interventions, but followed predictable patterns. An astronomer with records going back 1 Saros could predict every eclipse for the next Saros with reasonable accuracy. Extend the records back several Saros cycles, and predictions become even more reliable. The Babylonians developed eclipse prediction schemes covering hundreds of years, listing when and where eclipses would occur with impressive accuracy. But the Babylonians went further, developing what historians call mathematical astronomy, using arithmetic sequences and computational schemes to predict planetary positions without necessarily understanding the physical mechanisms involved. For each planet, they identified periodic patterns. Jupiter, for instance, takes approximately 12 years to orbit the Sun, though Babylonians didn't think in terms of orbits. More precisely, after 71 years, Jupiter completes almost exactly 6 revolutions through the zodiac, returning very close to its starting position. The Babylonians called this a goal year, a period after which a planet's behavior repeats. Using goal year periods, an astronomer could predict planetary positions years in advance. If you wanted to know where Jupiter would be in 71 years, you simply looked up where it was now. For more precision, Babylonians developed zigzag functions and linear interpolation schemes, mathematical tools for calculating intermediate values between known positions. These methods required no physical model of planetary motion, only recognition of numerical patterns in observational data. The sophistication of these computational methods is impressive. Consider the Babylonian lunar theory, which calculated the moon's position and the timing of lunar phenomena like new moons and eclipses. The moon's motion is complex due to multiple gravitational influences and orbital variations. Babylonian astronomers couldn't explain why the moon behaved as it did, but they developed mathematical models that accurately described how it behaved. They recognized that the moon's apparent speed varies throughout its orbit, moving faster at some times, slower at others. They quantified this variation using arithmetic progressions and created tables allowing them to calculate the moon's position for any date. These calculations appear in astronomical procedure text tablets that explain computational methods using step-by-step instructions. These texts are essentially ancient algorithms, mathematical recipes for calculating celestial phenomena. They use technical terminology and assume the reader has advanced mathematical training. Reading them today, you're struck by their systematic approach, their logical structure, their mathematical sophistication. This is recognizably scientific work, using methods that modern scientists would understand even if the notation is unfamiliar. The astronomical texts also include ephemerides tables listing calculated positions of celestial bodies for future dates. These tables allowed priests and administrators to plan religious festivals and administrative activities years in advance. An ephemeris might list the first visibility of the lunar crescent for every month over a 19-year period, or the positions of Jupiter throughout its 12-year cycle. Generating these tables required extensive calculations, all performed using sexagesimal, base 60 arithmetic on clay tablets with a stylus. Babylonian astronomy influenced other cultures through trade, conquest, and scholarly exchange. When the Persian Empire conquered Babylon in 539 BCE, Persian astronomers absorbed Babylonian methods. When Alexander the Great conquered the Persian Empire in 331 BCE, Greek scholars gained access to Babylonian astronomical records and computational techniques. The Greek astronomer Hipparchus, working around 150 BCE, explicitly acknowledged using Babylonian observations in his work. Ptolemy, the great astronomer of the 2nd century CE, cited Babylonian eclipse records going back centuries. This transmission of knowledge transformed Greek astronomy. Before contact with Babylonian astronomy, Greek cosmology was largely philosophical geometric models of planetary motion based on aesthetic principles, like circular orbits and uniform speeds. Babylonian observational data and mathematical methods provided empirical grounding for Greek theories. Greek astronomers could test their geometric models against centuries of Babylonian observations, refining their models to match reality. The Greek approach differed from the Babylonian. Greeks sought physical explanations, geometric models showing how planets actually moved through space. Babylonians were content with mathematical descriptions, arithmetic schemes that predicted where planets would appear without explaining the underlying mechanism. Eventually, Greek geometric methods and Babylonian computational techniques merged, creating the Greco-Babylonian astronomical tradition that dominated medieval Islamic and European astronomy. But we should be careful not to view Babylonian astronomy as merely a precursor to Greek achievements. On its own terms, Babylonian mathematical astronomy was remarkably successful. Their predictions were accurate, their methods were systematic, their observations were meticulous. They achieved these results through patience, precision, and mathematical insight. They created a scientific tradition that lasted centuries, surviving political upheavals, conquests, and cultural changes. The decline of Babylonian astronomy came not from any internal failure, but from external factors. As Hellenistic culture spread across the Near East following Alexander's conquests, Greek language and methods gradually displaced native Babylonian traditions. The last dated cuneiform astronomical text is from 75 CE, after nearly 2,000 years of continuous astronomical observation and calculation. The tradition ended. The ziggurat observatories fell silent. The astronomical diaries ceased. The knowledge didn't vanish entirely. Much had been transmitted to Greek, Persian, and eventually Islamic astronomers, but the distinctive Babylonian approach, the methods developed over millennia in Mesopotamia, disappeared. Modern scholars have only recently appreciated the full sophistication of Babylonian astronomy. For centuries, classical studies focused on Greek achievements, viewing Babylon as primitive precursor. Only in the 20th century, as cuneiform tablets were translated and mathematical methods reconstructed, did researchers realize that Babylonian astronomy rivaled Greek astronomy in sophistication and in some respects surpassed it in accuracy and practicality. The Babylonian achievement rests on several foundations. First, institutional continuity. Astronomical observation was supported by temples and kings across centuries, allowing knowledge to accumulate. Second, systematic methods, standardized observation formats, mathematical procedures, and predictive schemes. Third, comprehensive records. The astronomical diaries and related texts preserved data that could be analyzed and reanalyzed. Fourth, mathematical sophistication. The sexagesimal number system and advanced computational techniques. Perhaps most importantly, Babylonian astronomers demonstrated that celestial phenomena follow mathematical patterns discoverable through patient observation and analysis. This insight, that nature operates according to mathematical principles humans can discover and use for prediction, became fundamental to all later science. It's the core scientific principle. Nature is regular, patterns are discoverable, predictions are possible. Standing on a Babylonian ziggurat at midnight, stylus in hand, clay tablet ready, you join a tradition extending back 1,000 years and forward another 1,000. You're recording Jupiter's position near a reference star, noting the moon's phase, watching for meteors. Your observations will be filed with thousands of others. Data for future astronomers to analyze, patterns to discover, predictions to refine. You don't think you're doing science. That word won't exist for centuries. You think you're serving the gods, reading divine will, maintaining cosmic order. But the methods you use, the precision you achieve, the patterns you discover, these are scientific, regardless of how you frame them. And the knowledge you preserve, pressed into soft clay before it hardens, will survive longer than the civilization that created it, longer than the languages that recorded it, testifying across millennia to humanity's drive to understand the stars. Chapter 9. The Greeks perfect the system. The library at Alexandria contains over 400,000 scrolls, the accumulated knowledge of the Mediterranean world, collected by Ptolemaic Egypt's scholar kings. You're walking through the columned halls in 150 BCE, past shelves packed with works on medicine, mathematics, poetry, philosophy, and especially astronomy. Here are the observations of Babylonian astronomers, Egyptian star lore, Greek philosophical treatises. And at a table in the corner sits Hipparchus of Nicaea, surrounded by scrolls working with astronomical observations spanning centuries, comparing Babylonian eclipse records with his own observations and discovering something that will revolutionize astronomy: the precession of the equinoxes. Precession is subtle. The celestial pole, the point in the sky around which stars appear to rotate, isn't fixed. It moves in a slow circle, taking approximately 26,000 years to complete one revolution. This means the pole star changes over millennia. In our era, Polaris marks the pole. In ancient Egyptian times, Thuban served this role. In 13,000 years, Vega will be the pole star. This wobble, like a spinning top slowing down, is caused by gravitational forces from the sun and moon acting on Earth's equatorial bulge. Hipparchus didn't understand the physical cause that would wait for Isaac Newton, but he detected the effect. By comparing his measurements of star positions with observations made 150 years earlier by Timacaris, and with even older Babylonian records, Hipparchus noticed that stars had shifted slightly relative to the equinoxes. The equinox point where the celestial equator crosses the ecliptic was moving backward through the zodiac at about 1 degree per century. This meant the tropical year, equinox to equinox, was slightly shorter than the sidereal year, the time for the sun to return to the same position relative to the stars. Hipparchus calculated the precession rate as approximately 1 degree per century, remarkably close to the actual value of about 1.4 degrees per century. This discovery exemplifies the Greek approach to astronomy, combining observational data, often borrowed from Babylonian sources, with geometric reasoning and mathematical analysis. The Greeks didn't just want to predict where celestial objects would appear. They wanted to understand how the cosmos was structured, what mechanisms drove celestial motions, why planets moved in their peculiar patterns. They sought physical explanations, geometric models, causal mechanisms. This quest began centuries before Hipparchus. Thales of Miletus, around 585 BCE, reportedly predicted a solar eclipse, though he probably used Babylonian Saros cycle data rather than developing an original method. More significantly, Thales proposed that natural phenomena had natural causes, not divine interventions. This was revolutionary. Instead of saying Zeus causes thunder, Thales sought physical explanations. This naturalistic approach became characteristic of Greek philosophy and science. Pythagoras and his followers, around 500 BCE, made astronomy mathematical. They believed reality was fundamentally numerical, that mathematical relationships governed the cosmos. The Pythagoreans knew Earth was spherical. They observed ships disappearing whole, first over the horizon, and noticed Earth's curved shadow during lunar eclipses. They proposed that celestial bodies moved in perfect circles at uniform speeds, producing cosmic harmony. The music of the spheres, inaudible to human ears, but mathematically perfect. But observation contradicted this simple model. Planets don't move uniformly. They speed up and slow down. They exhibit retrograde motion periodically, reversing direction, looping backward through the zodiac before resuming forward motion. Mars, particularly, displays dramatic retrograde loops. If planets moved in simple circles around Earth at constant speeds, retrograde motion couldn't occur. The model needed refinement. Eudoxus of Cnidus, around 370 BCE, proposed an ingenious solution: homocentric spheres. Each celestial body was attached to multiple concentric spheres, all centered on Earth, rotating at different rates and different axes. The combined rotations produced complex paths that approximated observed planetary motions, including retrograde loops. Eudoxus's model required 27 spheres, total 1 for the stars, 3 each for the sun and moon, and 4 each for the 5 planets. His student Callippus added more spheres to improve accuracy, bringing the total to 34. Aristotle, Eudoxus's contemporary, adopted and modified this model, treating the spheres as physical objects, crystalline shells actually existing in space. Aristotle's cosmos was finite, spherical, geocentric, with Earth at the center, motionless, made of 4 elements: earth, water, air, fire. The celestial realm, beyond the moon, was made of a 5th element, ether, perfect and unchanging. Celestial objects moved in eternal circular motions, their natural behavior. This cosmology, combining physics, astronomy, and metaphysics into a comprehensive worldview, dominated Western thought for nearly 2,000 years. But Greek astronomers knew Aristotle's model didn't match observations precisely. Planetary distances from Earth clearly varied. Planets appear brighter when closer, dimmer when farther away. Homocentric spheres, with Earth always at the center, couldn't account for this. A new model was needed. Apollonius of Perga, around 200 BCE, introduced epicycles and deferents. Instead of moving directly around Earth, a planet moved on a small circle called an epicycle, while the epicycle's center moved around Earth on a larger circle called the deferent. This arrangement explained retrograde motion elegantly. When the planet moved on the part of its epicycle closest to Earth, and the epicycle's motion opposed the deferent's motion, the planet appeared to move backward. This geometric construction matched observations better than homocentric spheres while preserving the Greek commitment to circular motion. Hipparchus refined the epicycle model further. He introduced the eccentric, placing Earth slightly off-center from the deferent's geometric center. This accounted for the sun's apparent variation in speed throughout the year. The sun moves slightly faster in winter than summer because Earth is closer to the sun in winter. For the northern hemisphere, Hipparchus modeled this by making the sun's circular path eccentric relative to Earth's position. Hipparchus also created the first comprehensive star catalog from the Greek world, recording the positions and magnitudes of approximately 850 stars. He developed a magnitude system classifying stars by brightness: first magnitude for the brightest stars, 6th magnitude for the faintest visible to naked eye. This system, refined but fundamentally unchanged, remains in use today. His catalog allowed future astronomers to detect stellar motion and, as we've seen, led to his discovery of precession. The culmination of Greek mathematical astronomy came with Claudius Ptolemy, working in Alexandria around 150 CE. Ptolemy's great work, the Almagest, from the Arabic al-Magisti, meaning the greatest, synthesized centuries of Greek and Babylonian astronomy into a comprehensive treatise. The Almagest contained mathematical models for calculating the positions of the sun, moon, and planets. A star catalog listing 1,022 stars. Instructions for constructing astronomical instruments, geometric proofs of the model's validity, and tables allowing predictions of celestial positions. Ptolemy's planetary models used epicycles, deferents, eccentrics, and one more device, the equant. The equant was a point offset from Earth, from which the epicycle's motion appeared uniform. This violated the Greek principle that celestial motions must be truly uniform, not just apparently uniform from an arbitrary point. But it worked. Ptolemy's models matched observations more accurately than any previous system. The equant became the most controversial element of Ptolemaic astronomy, criticized by Islamic astronomers who saw truly uniform circular motions, eventually contributing to the model's abandonment. Ptolemy's lunar model was particularly sophisticated, accounting for the moon's variable distance from Earth, the inclination of its orbit, and its changing apparent size. The model predicted lunar positions accurately enough for eclipse calculations and calendar keeping. Ptolemy's planetary models achieved similar accuracy, typically predicting positions within a few degrees adequate for naked eye observation and far better than earlier models. But not all Greek astronomers accepted geocentrism. Aristarchus of Samos, around 270 BCE, proposed a heliocentric model sun at the center, Earth and planets orbiting around it. Aristarchus' model explained retrograde motion naturally. It is an optical illusion caused by Earth passing other planets in their orbits, or being passed by inner planets. The heliocentric arrangement was geometrically simpler and more elegant than geocentric epicycles. Why did heliocentrism fail to gain acceptance? Partly because it contradicted common sense and Aristotelian physics. If Earth moved, why don't we feel it? Why doesn't the wind constantly blow from the east as Earth rotates west? Why don't objects thrown upward get left behind as Earth moves beneath them? Heliocentrism lacked a satisfactory physics to replace Aristotle's geocentric framework. More seriously, heliocentrism predicted stellar parallax apparent shifting of nearby stars relative to distant stars as Earth orbits the Sun. No such parallax was observed. Greek astronomers correctly reasoned that if heliocentrism was true and parallax wasn't visible, stars must be incredibly distant. But this seemed implausible. Why would the cosmos be mostly empty space with stars unimaginably far away? The geocentric model, by contrast, placed stars on a sphere just beyond Saturn, creating a compact, efficient cosmos with no wasted space. Greek astronomy also made significant contributions to understanding the size of celestial objects and their distances. Aristarchus calculated the relative distances to the Sun and Moon by observing the Moon at half phase, when it forms a right angle with the Sun and Earth. By measuring the angle between Sun and Moon at this moment, he could calculate the Sun's distance relative to the Moon's. His measurement was inaccurate due to the difficulty of determining the exact moment of half phase, but his method was geometrically sound. Eratosthenes, around 240 BCE, calculated Earth's circumference using an ingeniously simple method. He knew that at noon on the summer solstice in Syene, modern Aswan, the sun shone directly down a well, casting no shadow. On the same day in Alexandria, about 500 miles north, the sun cast a shadow indicating it was about 7 degrees from vertical. Since 7 degrees is roughly 1/50th of a full circle, Earth's circumference must be about 50 times the distance from Alexandria to Syene. His calculation yielded approximately 250,000 stadia converted to modern units. This is remarkably close to the actual value, though the exact conversion factor for stadia is uncertain. Posidonius, around 100 BCE, refined this measurement using observations of the star Canopus, which just grazes the horizon at Rhodes but appears higher in the sky from Alexandria. By measuring this difference and the distance between cities, he calculated Earth's circumference, though his result was less accurate than Eratosthenes's. And unfortunately, later geographers sometimes preferred Posidonius's smaller value, leading to underestimates of Earth's size. Greek astronomical knowledge spread throughout the Mediterranean and Near East, carried by Alexander's conquests and maintained through institutions like the Library of Alexandria. When Rome conquered the Greek world, Roman scholars preserved and transmitted Greek learning, though they added little original work. The Romans were practical engineers and administrators, not theoretical scientists. They adopted Greek cosmology and astronomical techniques for calendar making and timekeeping, but didn't significantly advance astronomical theory. The Greek astronomical tradition continued in the Eastern Roman Byzantine Empire, where scholars preserved ancient texts and wrote commentaries. But the most important preservers and developers of Greek astronomy were Islamic scholars. When Islamic civilization expanded across the Near East and North Africa in the 7th and 8th centuries CE, Muslim scholars encountered Greek astronomical texts. They translated the Almagest and other works into Arabic, studied them intensively, and began making their own observations and theoretical innovations. Islamic astronomers corrected errors in Ptolemaic models, developed new computational methods, created improved astronomical tables, built sophisticated observatories with large instruments for precise measurements, and made significant theoretical contributions. The astrolabe, a mechanical device for solving astronomical problems, reached its highest development in Islamic civilization. Many star names we use today, Betelgeuse, Aldebaran, Rigel, Altair, are Arabic words, reflecting Islam's astronomical heritage. Islamic scholars also transmitted Greek astronomy to medieval Europe. As European scholars in the 12th and 13th centuries translated Arabic texts into Latin, they rediscovered the Greek astronomical tradition that had been largely lost in Western Europe following Rome's collapse. Universities in Paris, Oxford, and Bologna began teaching Ptolemaic astronomy. European scholars like Roger Bacon and Thomas Aquinas grappled with reconciling Aristotelian natural philosophy with Christian theology. This transmission created the intellectual foundation for the scientific revolution. When Copernicus proposed heliocentrism in 1543, he was reviving and refining Aristarchus's ancient model. When Tycho Brahe made precise observations in the late 16th century, he used instruments descended from Islamic quadrants and astrolabes, themselves based on Greek designs. When Kepler discovered planetary orbits were elliptical, not circular, he was breaking free from Greek insistence on perfect circles. When Newton explained celestial mechanics through gravitational physics, he finally provided the physical foundation that Aristarchus's heliocentrism had lacked. The Greek contribution to astronomy was transformative. They turned astronomy from a collection of observations and predictions into a mathematical science seeking physical understanding. They developed geometric models explaining celestial motions. They made systematic observations and cataloged stars. They calculated sizes and distances of celestial objects. They created the concepts ecliptic, equator, parallax, precession that remain fundamental to astronomy. But perhaps their greatest contribution was methodological. They demonstrated that observation and mathematical reasoning could yield knowledge about nature. They showed that reality followed mathematical principles discoverable through careful investigation. They established that natural phenomena had natural causes, explicable without invoking divine intervention. These principles, empirical observation, mathematical analysis, natural causation, became the foundation of modern science. Standing in the ruins of the Library of Alexandria, imagining the scrolls that once filled these halls, you're standing at a crucial junction in human intellectual history. Here, Greek geometric reasoning met Babylonian observational data. Here, Egyptian practical astronomy encountered Greek theoretical sophistication. Here, the the great synthesis occurred, creating the astronomical tradition that would dominate for over a millennium and provide the foundation for the scientific revolution to come. The library is gone now, destroyed by fire and time. Most of its scrolls are lost, but the ideas developed here, the mathematical models, the geometric insights, the scientific method, these survived. They passed through Islamic civilization, entered medieval Europe, sparked the Renaissance, and became the basis for modern astronomy. The stars Hipparchus measured still shine. The precession he discovered continues its slow cycle. And the questions the Greeks asked: how is the cosmos structured? What causes celestial motions? Can mathematics reveal nature's patterns? These questions still drive astronomy today. The night sky above Mauna Kea in Hawaii is among the darkest on Earth. Modern telescopes cluster on this mountaintop, their domes gleaming white against the black volcanic rock. These instruments can detect light from galaxies billions of light years away, observe planets orbiting distant stars, measure the universe's expansion, probe the nature of dark matter and dark energy. Yet remarkably, they stand on an island first settled by Polynesian navigators who crossed thousands of miles of open ocean using only the stars to guide them. Ancient and modern astronomy share this sacred mountain, separated by centuries but united by the same drive to understand the cosmos. This is the paradox we've explored throughout this journey. Astronomical knowledge is both ancient and modern, both spiritual and scientific, both practical and profound. The questions that drove the first humans to study the stars remain relevant today. How do we find our way? How do we mark time? What patterns can we discover? What does it all mean? The methods have transformed beyond recognition: clay tablets replaced by computer databases, naked eye observations supplemented by radio telescopes and space probes, geometric models superseded by quantum mechanics and relativity. But the fundamental impulse persists: look up, observe, understand, predict. The legacy of ancient astronomy is more than historical curiosity. It's the foundation of modern science and the reminder that science emerges from human needs and aspirations. When Babylonian priests climbed ziggurats to record planetary positions, they were serving gods but also advancing mathematics. When Mayan astronomers calculated Venus cycles, they were performing religious duties but also developing sophisticated calendrical systems. When Polynesian navigators memorized their paths, they were preserving cultural knowledge but also demonstrating remarkable cognitive capabilities. When megalithic peoples aligned monuments to solstices, they were creating sacred spaces but also encoding astronomical observations in permanent form. These ancient astronomers gave us more than data. They gave us the concept that nature follows discoverable patterns, that mathematics describes reality, that sustained observation reveals truth. They demonstrated that knowledge can accumulate across generations, preserved in monuments, texts, oral traditions. They proved that human ingenuity can overcome technological limitations, achieving remarkable precision with simple tools, maintaining accuracy across centuries without writing, navigating vast distances without instruments. Perhaps most importantly, they showed that astronomy isn't just about celestial objects, but about humanity's place in the universe. Every culture that studied the stars did so partly because the heavens seemed to speak to fundamental questions of existence. Modern astronomy has revealed that we're literally made of stardust, that our atoms were forged in stellar cores, that we're participants in cosmic evolution spanning billions of years. Ancient peoples intuited this connection without our technology, seeing in the stars not just distant lights, but part of a cosmic whole that included humanity. Today, we face a peculiar problem. Our technological civilization has achieved unprecedented astronomical knowledge while simultaneously making the night sky invisible to much of humanity. Light pollution obscures stars above major cities. Digital screens replace direct observation. Few people can identify more than a handful of constellations. The intimate knowledge of the sky that was universal in ancient times has become specialist expertise. Yet the revival of traditional Polynesian navigation, the continued study of ancient astronomical sites, the persistent fascination with archaeoastronomy, these suggest that something in us still responds to ancient astronomical wisdom. Perhaps it's recognition that our ancestors weren't primitive mystics, but sophisticated thinkers who achieved remarkable results with limited tools. Perhaps it's appreciation for the beauty of systems that integrated astronomical knowledge with culture, religion, and daily life. Perhaps it's simply the timeless wonder of looking up at the stars and asking eternal questions. The stars that guided the first civilizations still shine above us, their patterns unchanged across millennia. The sun still marks the seasons. The moon still cycles through its phases. The planets still wander through the zodiac. The cosmos continues its dance, indifferent to human affairs yet somehow intimately connected to our existence. We are children of the universe, made of its substance, governed by its laws, participants in its story. Ancient astronomers understood this connection intuitively. They looked up and saw not abstract physics, but living cosmos, divine, meaningful, interconnected with human life. Modern astronomy has revealed the physics behind celestial phenomena, but in doing so, it has perhaps lost some of the wonder and meaning that motivated ancient sky watchers. We know more than any previous civilization about the universe's structure, history, and laws. But do we feel more connected to the cosmos than the Maya priest tracking Venus, the Polynesian navigator following star paths, the Egyptian pharaoh transformed into a star, the Babylonian scribe recording celestial omens? This is the gift ancient astronomy offers modern people, not just knowledge but perspective. It reminds us that studying the sky has always been about more than data collection. It's been about finding meaning, seeking connection, understanding our place in existence. The tools change, the theories evolve, but the fundamental human impulse persists: to look up in wonder and ask why. As our journey through ancient astronomy concludes, look up at the night sky if you can find a place dark enough to see it properly. Those stars witnessed everything we've discussed. They shone above the first humans who carved lunar calendars on bones. They guided Polynesian voyagers across the Pacific. They aligned with passages in megalithic tombs. They provided the celestial coordinate system Babylonian astronomers used to track planets. They formed the constellations that populated Greek, Egyptian, Chinese, and Maya mythologies. They're the same stars that inspired Hipparchus, Ptolemy, Al-Batani, Copernicus, Kepler, and countless others who advanced our understanding of the cosmos. The story of how the stars guided the first civilizations is ultimately a story about human capability, our ability to observe, remember, calculate, predict, preserve, and transmit knowledge across generations and cultures. It's a story about how necessity and curiosity combine to produce understanding. It's a story about how different cultures independently developed sophisticated astronomical knowledge, each shaped by their needs and worldviews, but all achieving genuine insights into cosmic patterns. Above all, it's a story that continues. We are the latest chapter in the long human tradition of looking up and wondering. We inherit millennia of accumulated astronomical knowledge, built by countless observers whose names we'll never know, preserved by institutions and individuals who valued understanding enough to protect and transmit it. This inheritance enriches our lives and enables our civilization. We would do well to honor it, not just as historical artifact, but as living tradition. The endless human quest to understand the stars and, through understanding them, to understand ourselves. The first civilizations looked up and began to read the heavens. We're still reading, still discovering, still wondering. The cosmos above remains vast, mysterious, beautiful, an eternal invitation to observation and understanding. The stars still guide us not physically, as they guided ancient navigators, but intellectually and spiritually, reminding us of our place in the universe and our connection to the long chain of humans who looked up before us and will look up after us. This is the legacy written in the heavens, not just astronomical data, but the enduring human drive to understand our cosmic home, a legacy as eternal as the stars themselves.